Sword of Coming Chapter 858. This chapter does not count as the 7th update, there is another chapter update on the 7th. After the first half of the fairy High-Rand city was shot out with a slap, thousands of streamers lighted up at the same time, and those were the monks who had escaped from the fairy High-Rand city by Yufeng. Lu Xun glanced at this celestial and ethereal scene, which was colorful and magnificent, but it was a pity that the trees fell down and scattered. From now on, the wilderness will no longer have the highest city. Working hard to gather the sand into a mountain, once the water disperses, the wind is always blown away by the rain. But today, the fairy hairpin city was abruptly interrupted and then hammered by a young hidden official as a pure martial artist. Lu Xun closed his gaze and reminded, "We are almost ready to stop. Too much involvement here will prevent the sword from being released." Chen Pingan bears the real name of the Great Demon, and the Great Wall of Hadao Jinchi was defeated by the Great Tao of Wild World. In fact, Lu Chen's long journey was not easy. He needed to help Chen Pingan continue to evolve the Taoism and resolve the illusory and ubiquitous victory. Otherwise, there are 3 Benue talisman, handy. After all, it is different from the Sanshan talisman. The Benue talisman was created by Lu Qin. The 3 swordsmen had nothing to do in the Qingming world. If you feel bored in Baiyujing, you will be alone. The wind is too empty. Drinking in the moonlight. Different from the barbaric world, the moons in the other worlds are all forbidden places without suspense. Even if the monk's realm is enough to support a long journey, he can rise to the moon, and they are all first-class forbidden. Just talk about the Qingming world. There was a great monk who tried to travel the ruins of the ancient moon palace illegally. However, Yu Dou was aware of it in Baiyujing, and he fell into the world with a sword, and went directly from the ascent to Yupu. Returning to the sect, borrowing wine in the bright moon of your family's blessed land to seduce your sorrows, threatening that your second child has the ability to take care of it. I drink in your own place, and you will take charge of heaven and earth again. But Yu Doujin handed out another sword. And then cut the blessed land and Mingyue into 2. By the end of the hundreds of Taoist officials, no one dared to beat the heavenly drum and call for grievances, turning it into a joke. Chen Pingan's Taoist Faxiang finally stopped, and glanced at the traces of the monks fleeing in the sky. It seems that there is no figure of the deputy city Lord Inlu, and that half of the city cannot detect the breath of this monster. Can you find it? Lu Qin smiled and said, "It is estimated that I hid it with some secret method. I ask for wealth and danger. Immortal Hairpin City Avenue has already taken root here. As long as you don't destroy that branch of Dao Hairpin, this one can immediately make up for the lack of City Lord. The Silver Deer Immortal still has a chance to rise again. With its cultivating aptitude, it is not an extravagant hope to find an ascendant realm. Of course, it is an empty ascended realm. It is not much better than its master, and it loses wildly. The face of the demon, no wonder Xuanpu has not dared to appear in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. When we go to the half of the city, the poor will know how to do arithmetic, and maybe we can find clues." Speaking of this, Lu Qin rarely showed a somewhat solemn look. Tolerant said a word, "Don't think about interrupting that hairpin, the owner of this thing has a great merit in our world. According to the old yellow calendar, it belongs to the merits of the Tao, the deeds in the world, and the satisfaction of deeds. So we had better not provoke them." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Then click to stop, don't waste time here." Lu Xun said with emotion, "It is one thing to break Xiandan City with double fists. It is obviously even more feat from the perspective of Pang Dao to let the monks of Xianyan City tear down the ancestor hall. Putting away the 8,000-foot-tall Taoists' facial features and the same height as ordinary people, Chen Pingan once again turned into the appearance of the Taoist crown and green robe, looked up at the more pleasing Xianjian City, and smiled. "It's just a knowledge. That's why. The reason is very simple. It is like a family of people who like to be kind and benevolent. It is difficult to understand why some rich and noble families sitting on Jinshan Shan are more stingy than themselves, and why good money is hard to give up. In fact, they can't break the line. Some of the money entered the house by the side, how can you expect it to go out of the front door? Just like a mundane master, it is difficult to do it, but it is difficult for a person to ask for hard work without asking for a reason. It is also difficult for a cultivator to really ask for the cause and not for the result. Lucian felt a little moved, put his fingers together, drew straight down, and drew a vertical line. Next to the line, he drew a cicada, like a cicada stopping a tree. A paper cicada, as if it was screaming in the autumn wind, know it. Lu Qin raised his hands again, drew a picture frame with his fingers, and put the picture in his sleeve. It's a worthwhile trip. Lu Xun stretched his palm over his forehead, looked around, and asked, Ning Yao and the others haven't rushed here yet, what do you say? Go and find out what Yinla's greetings. Anyway, this place is the last mountain city. There is no time limit to stay only for a stick of incense. When the three of Ning Yao come here to meet, then Lu Chen can give the last three mountain symbols, the three mountain cities. They are Jiuquan sect, the Wooding River in the waters of the Luluo River, Tuiyue Mountain. If not in a hurry to rush to Tuiyue Mountain, Chen Pingan really doesn't mind staying in place, waiting for the rabbit on the side of Xiandan City. If you add the criminal officer Haosu, you will be a 14th realm, 3 ascendant sword repairmen, and a fairyland sword repairer whose killing power can be regarded as the ascendant realm. What's more, the top combat power in a wild world is most likely already in the battlefield where Liang and his brother are left. Who will rush to help? If he didn't dare to come, Chen Pingan would want to lend some courage to the old and new throne demon. Lu Xun smiled and said, this fairy silver deer is a must for his possessions and hidden traces. The half of the fairy hairpin city in front of you has not left you with any valuables. In fact, this is cleverness against being mistaken by cleverness, which is very unwise. Moreover, at this moment, inside and outside of the fairy hairpin city, it is not only the young hermit who wants the life of the silver deer. Chen Pingan said in a deep voice, the blessed land, if you can take it away, take it away, if you can't take it away, even if you dig the ground 3 feet, even if I completely smash the fairy hairpin city, I will find it. Lu Xun smiled bitterly, me. Not us yet. Chen Pingan smiled and said, even if it's interest dividends from a partnership business, there is no credit and hard work in the way of Master Lu's teaching. If I can only go in and out, I won't be able to stand it anymore. Lu Xun's eyes lit up, I really want to succeed. I will not take it to the Qingming world. I will give it to the Confucian Temple in exchange for 3 chances to visit the half of the fairy hairpin city hundreds of miles away, like a monk's corpse. But in an instant, the damaged high city, which was shaped like a mountain range, stood up to the sky again, trying to swoop back to the original place and rejoin the lower half. Was only stepped on by Chen Pingan, and fell back to the ground in an instant, with the 14 realms of Taoism, forcibly suppressing the natal traction of that Taoist hairpin. At the same time, Chen Pingan, dressed as a Taoist, raised his hand and drew a talisman above the fairy hairpin city in front of him. In fact, he just wrote the word mountain. And Chen Pingan, the green shirt in the other place, turned on the watermark of the natal thing, painted a talisman with his finger volley, and then wrote a water talisman. The mountains and rivers depend on each other, but they are different after all. Qingshan Chen Pingan took a trip to the alchemy room built on the top of the mountain by Xuanpu, and used the magical powers in his sleeve. Not to mention the 3 alchemy furnaces, hundreds of bottles and cans on the shelf were put in the sleeves. Then I put away the wooden frame on which the immortality was stored, and found that the wood had a very good texture. It was a kind of unknown wood from the immortal family. I removed the beams and pillars of the houses that hugged the wood and collected them together. Finally, I found that the ground was as luster. The gold bricks seemed to be a bit particular. I squatted down and pried open a brick, and found that every base was engraved with the year number, the supervisor, and the name of the craftsman. Only one shook his sleeve and put all the more than 2,000 gold bricks into the sleeve. In the end, Chen Pingan looked at the big house of the four-walled apprentice. There was nothing. He originally planned to do good things to the end, but he thought about it again and felt that he should stay alive. Chen Pingan, who is back with a sword and a blue shirt, returns to the Patriarch Hole. In fact, it can be called a ruin. The founder of Xianyan City, it seems that he didn't give himself a road number, but had only one name, which belonged to Lingxiang. She is the woman monk painted in the middle of the hanging statue, and she is the second master of that ancient Taoist hairpin. The supreme master of the immortal Inlu, Dao No. Qianggu, was the old ghost woman who acted decisively at the wrong time. She gave up a handful of extremely high-ranking treasure whisk to disperse all the golden sesame oil. On her dark return journey, a very eye-catching golden avenue was paved. In fact, in order to protect herself at the time, she also pitted a handful of direct disciples. It was the burly old man with the name Wui. Xiong-O wanted to ensure that Ten the Four Realms' great monk didn't try her best to target herself. When she grabbed the scroll from Taishu, she also blocked a control technique of her disciple Wui, which made the latter fail to follow suit. Wu Wei is standing at the border of the ruins of the Patriarch Hole. The old monk wears a black robe with a halberd hair and beard. He holds 2 scrolls in his hand. Of course, the hanging image has been destroyed, otherwise the handle will fall into the hands of the green shirt guest. I really don't think I have any good fruits. Since the opponent was able to throw it here before, he naturally has the confidence to get it back. The wild great demon style of acting, in many cases, is such a straightforward, as long as you want to decide something, there will be no twists and turns. Therefore, Wuqi was not at all ambiguous, and within less than half of the incense, he killed the beloved disciple Xuanpu who had taken the fairy hairpin city from his own hand. Indeed, Xuanpu, this fellow, is not good at fighting when he is young. Taking advantage of the fact that Wuqi could stay in the sun for a while, after completing the Xuanpu, he had already released a share of God's sense. He wanted to find out the Xuanpus progeny more than the unidentified Qingshan guessed. One of the city masters of Xianzhan City. Only the city lord of the past dynasties passed the truth down to the successor, and the matter is not secret. There are different ways to go back and forth between yin and yang, with many rules. Although the picture scroll has been destroyed, but to be careful, Wu Tai still plans to kill the disciple again and remove the roots. The Taoist lineage of Xianzhan City, how the incense is inherited, is no more precious than your own Dao life. One of the avatars of Wudong just now grabbed a cultivator of Zion's Hanqing genealogy, and after asking the silver deer's identity and road number, he twisted the grandson of the Golden Core realm and broke his neck with one bite. The demon pill, these things that are hard to redeem, have ruined their ancestors, and only one death once in 100 are considered lucky. Wui has many methods to make a monk better than death. The problem is that the city of Xiandan has changed a lot now, and Wuti is actually unable to find the hiding place of the disciple again. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Is it looking for the silver deer, without leaving any future troubles? So that the future city lord will repaint the portrait and once again worship the incense and bring the truth to the patriarch's arrival in the sun." Wu Wei glanced at the long sword that had never been sheathed, and sneered, "A trash disciple who only lays on the belly of a lady and sprinkles wild, what do I worry about? I only worry that you will be waiting by the side." Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "If you worry too much, I will leave Xiandan City soon." Xiandan City. There is still a fart fairy town. Wu Qi chuckled, "It's none of my anyway." Banqing posted a mountain talisman, causing Gaoqing to sink continuously, bordering the roots of the mountain, and here, after a water talisman was cast, there were signs of heavy snow. I believe it will soon usher in a heavy snowfall. Once that branch of the hairpin was too much immersed in the landscape and luck, the monks of later generations wanted to forcibly strip off the two talismans of the landscape that had been united in form and spirit, just like the skinning cramps of the ordinary master and the separation of the souls of the monks. Unless the 14th level monk who is proficient in full Taoism really leaves immediately, and then another great monk of the same realm rushes over immediately, he does not hesitate to spend his own way and help immortal Hairpin City pull its cocoons, and then it is possible to recover roughly. But it must be an idiot dreaming. Is it possible that there are many 14th realm great monks in this world? The old monk looked back at the place where the female portrait of the founder of the mountain was hung up in the past. It was a bit sad. I didn't have a good impression of the Master Cheong-o. She did such a deed. Not only was Wu Wei not surprised, but she was not even angry, except that she had a very different impression of the female ancestor returning to Lingxiang. Returning to Lingxiang has the heart, but it is a pity that she has such a prodigal. The founder of Xianyeking returned to Lingxiang. She has excellent cultivating aptitude, but she has no ambitions. She seems to practice for a lifetime, just to make a fairy tale city closer to the sky. It was the second generation of the city lord, that is, the old woman Qianggu, who retreated to the land of darkness when the opportunity was not good, and only then began to have a relationship with the wild sects including Tuo Yuashan. But Cheong-o still obeyed his master's orders, and did not move the ancestral blessed land with a falling star. The fairy hairpin city was passed to the hands of Wuqi, and then he began to seek change. Of course, it was more of Wookiee's selfishness. In order to benefit his own practice, he broke the bottleneck of the fairyland faster, began to forge weapons, sold them to the sect on the mountain, and made money. When Xuanpu took over Xianzhan City, it was quite different. A blessed land named Yaoguang by the patriarch returned to Lingxiang was excavated and managed to the greatest extent, and began to do business with major dynasties. Pu likes to sell magic weapons to two dynasties that are not far apart at the same time, but Xianye's transcendent status in the wild world is indeed promoted by Xian Pu. Uchi finally asked the most curious question, "Are you?" The last time he showed up, Woody still teamed up with Master Qianggu to deal with the domineering ancestor who moved the mountain, and even begged for more money, so that Xiandan City escaped. So Wu Tai is not at all aware of the current situation in the wild world. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "The last hermit of the Great Wall of Jinqi." No wonder. Wuqi nodded, "Then you can beat Xiao Xian more than before." This ascending realm ghost quickly added, "But Xiao Yan was not very young at that time." Chen Pingon smiled. Wu Tai couldn't help asking, "How long have you been practicing?" "I said that you don't look like a true Taoist priest. Since you are a native swordsman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there must be no such monk who speaks no words and lives. Rule." Chen Pingon said, "Less than 1,000 years old." Uchi was amazed, and gave a thumbs up to the younger cultivator, and said sincerely, "Wizard of Heaven. The wild world does not recognize anything, only recognizes a realm." Chen Pingon said, "Just over 40 years old." Wu Chao was stunned, then waved his hand, "You have to have a degree when you tell jokes." In the extremely dry, lonely and gloomy land that day, it is difficult to find a big living person to chat. Besides, any ghost dangling over there, no matter how high or low it is, never want to meet a Yang Jian, a human monk who can swim through the underworld, who dares to provoke. It is really harder than a ghost. Wuqi still couldn't find the silver deer, so he had to admit his fate, begging that the disciple didn't know the method of the Zushitang's reduction of truth. Otherwise, don't look at this moment and talk with the hidden official in front of you. It seems to be very friendly and wealthy, but Wuqi, I can guarantee that as long as the opposing party catches the opportunity, the two sides will reunite immediately, and it will inevitably be a fight for life. The old monk glanced at the north direction. "By the way, one last question, what happened to Dong San? Golden pill when you come, soaring when you go." This is a unique feat in the 10,000-year history of the Great Wall of Jinchi. A sword repairman in the Golden Core realm took the wild world as a place for sword refining. In the end, he not only returned to the Great Wall of Sword Chi alive, but the key was that when Dong Sanging returned to his hometown, he also brought the head of an ascending realm great demon. Chen Pingon pointed to the sky curtain. Don't you think something is missing? Wu Yan glanced at the sky, only to realize that there were only 2 bright moons. Fuck, it is indeed something Dong Sanzhen has done. In the ruins of the Patriarch's Hall behind Wu Qi, is the true body of the ascended realm monk Xuanpu, which is actually a scarlet black snake. There is no record of this incident on the Summer Palace, but Bai Yujing's third head teacher has a wide range of knowledge, and he said that he broke the secrets and solved the confusion for Chen Pingon. The ancient mysterious snake, which is like a long rope, hangs in the sky, and the avenue is far away. Lead the ground. Recommendation: the reading app I'm using recently, app. There are many sources of books, all books, and fast updates. So this senior Xuanpu, and the inheritance of the incense of the fairy hairpin city, are naturally in harmony with the Great Road. When this city owner, it is my duty. Xuanpu really made the fairy hairpin city a place of scenic victory. This Dao No, obtained appropriately, is much better than Yipa's imaginary, single step. I never thought that Xuanpu is still a genuine product. Chen Pingon asked heartily, is Xuanpu's real body shorter? Although it is entrenched in the ruins of the Patriarch Hall, in fact it is no more than 1,000 feet long. According to the agreement, Chen Pingon will hand it over to the criminal Haosu for any big monster in the wild world. Lu Qin smiled and said, Jing Yuan has been lost, and I was fed by Wu Chao, and this real body skin is left. It is nameless and resembling a snake. However, Wu Chao is still interesting and has not breached the contract. I promised you to leave a soaring realm demon pill. Chen Pingon was quite puzzled. He waved his sleeve and put the mysterious snake into his bag. He couldn't help but ask, Wu Krai's harvest on the Yangjian side can still feed back the underworld. It's an illusion, and there is no way to go. Yes. Is it possible for Wudong to not be restricted by the rules of the roads of Yumanjilu? Lu Shen smiled and said, the sky is infinite, and there are always winding paths leading to secluded places. Chen Pingon saw that Wu Kai's figure had been erratic and showed signs of disappearing, and suddenly asked, as a ghost on the path of the netherworld, have you ever heard of a monk named Zhong Kuei? Wu Kui's heartstrings are tense, and an old ghost in the ascending realm has failed to hide that little change in expression. It can be seen that the name Zhong Kuei has not only heard of it, but it must be remembered deeply by Wu Di. Wu Qi was too lazy to remedy or cover up, curled his lips, and said straightforwardly, this name is like thunder in our land. Chen Pingon smiled and said, have you never dealt with Zhong Kuei? Wu Qi sneered, if I have dealt with, can I still chat with the hermit? From beginning to end, Wu Qi never mentioned the word Zhong Kuei. According to Lu Qin, an earth immortal is half of the heavens and the earth, refining the form and living in the world, and can live forever. The ghost cultivation is called the ghost immortal, which is much inferior. It is the outside body of the sun god, and only the Yin, the ghost of the Qingling spirit, still belongs to the uncertified avenue, so the idol is unknown, the 3 mountains are nameless, although they do not reincarnate, it is difficult to enter the green status, wandering indefinitely, and finally having no return. Especially the ghosts who choose to stay on the path of the underworld are regarded as rebellious, and they are the first targets of the ghost judges to patrol the territory of the underworld. Chen Pingon knew all these things before, but Lu Qin called him an obsessive generation, which sounded weird. Lu Qin sold a pass without clearly explaining the origin of the Tao. He only said that Mr. Sanshan Joho, whom we burned incense to pay homage, had little appearance, otherwise the ghosts and immortals would slightly offend the sky, and one would be cut off. Why? Sanshan Johor has long been in a place of cultivating, and a monument has been erected to announce that the world is peaceful and stubborn. Before Y's figure dissipated, I hope that both parties will not meet again in the future. Chen Pingan held the whisk, shook it, and said with a smile, "Follow fate." Wait until the woozy completely dissipated. Lu Chen lay on the lotus petals, staring at Chen Ping's hand in a daze, and said, "Poor Dao can buy this thing with a lot of money." Chen Ping put the dust into his sleeve. "It's easy to say, as long as the price is right, you can talk." Lu Shen heard this and turned over, lying in the dojo, with Erlang's legs raised. Then there was no more talk. Chen Pingan reminded, "Don't forget the new lord of the city." Lu Shen said, "Here comes." The fairy silver deer, from a mysterious landscape, as if being dragged out by someone, fell severely on the side of the Zushitang site. Yinlu saw the Taoist man with sleeves in both hands, smiled and said, "Come on, continue to open the door to welcome guests." The first mountain city of the Sanshan Talisman, on the side of the Moor dynasty, Lu Ji heard that he could stay here for a stick of incense, and his eyes flashed, staring at the jade version that had lost a sword formation. City. Lu Ji holds two swords, Nanming and Easy Blade. Sword intent is Taoism, and two visions are manifested respectively. Lu Ji is standing in the middle of the big water of Tianqi, and a big blue fish swims in the sky. Then old by law, I am responsible for killing people with swords. While you are blocking the road, you are looking for money. We will each account for 40%, and Chen Pingan will leave 20%. Qi Tingji smiled and nodded. When did become the old rules? Just waited until the two of them entered the city with their swords all the way, unimpeded, and even a large formation of the city was not opened, which really surprised Qi Tingji. Isn't there a Yi waterfall that has just entered the Ascension realm here? It seems that there is still a woman who is the end of the world. Lu Ji said, "Will Chen Pingan just leave us some leftovers?" Qi Tingji smiled and said, "I don't want to come too far. In fact, Yi Waterfall has long been away from the Jade City with a white blade. He is close enough to carry the treasures. In short, it is easy to carry the heavy treasures. They are all swept away and fled in a hurry." The mountain city located between Yuban City and Xiandan City is a place called Chunjian Mountain. Here, the spring mountains are verdant and the spring water flows long. There is a fairy family saying that peaches and plums marry the spring breeze. Ning Yao stayed here for a long time, walking all the way, as if determined to use up a stick of incense, similar to the previous Dayue Qingshan. As long as she did not come to provoke her, she just came here to visit the scenery, and finally Ning Yao was in a stream. Stopping by the bank, I saw a Buddhist language on the inscription, and I faced my head with a white blade, as if cutting a spring breeze. Ning Yao was stunned for a long time, turned his head back, saw Qi Tingji and Lu Ji, and found that Lu Ji seemed to be in a good mood. It was rare to have a smiling face. Ning Yao just waited for the two to respect the incense, and went to the fairy tale city together. Appearing in the boundary of Xiandan City, Qi Tingji stretched out his fingers and rubbed his eyebrows. "I know that it will be the result, until I see it with my own eyes, or..." Lu Ji nodded and said, "Sure enough, the act of picking up money is not enough for the two of us together. We really just missed it." When they rushed to the site of the Patriarch Hall of Xiandan City, Chen Pingan had already dealt with the fairy Silver Deer, who had just become the city lord, and got the blessed land of Yaoguang. Handed to Ning Yao and the others the last copy of the Three Mountain Talisman, Chen Pingan smiled. "I might be lazy and find a place to drink a little wine at Jiuquan sect. You can go to Wuding first after you finish your work here. Wait for me over there." Ning Yao nodded and took the lead in holding Fu Yuanyu. As early as on the Jinchi Great Wall, she developed the habit of letting Chen Pingan drink alone. Lu Ji asked, "Is there any leakage to pick up here?" Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Of course, although there is no time limit, you still strive to leave within a stick of incense. Qi Tingji said, Lu Ji, shall we act separately? Lu Ji said, you are at a high level, run a long way, and go to that half of the fairy city. Qi Tingji's sword and rainbow are instantly there. Chen Pingan joked, yes, so familiar. Lu Ji grinned, bending over to pick up money is something like a fool. 3 copies of the 3 mountain talisman, almost equivalent to traveling half a wild world. White Flower City, ruins of ancient battlefields, Dayue Qingshan. Yuban City of Yunwen Dynasty, Chunjian Mountain, Xiandan City. Juquanzong, Wuting, Tiuashan. It seems that Chen Pingan is deliberately or unintentionally letting a heartstring relax and have a degree. Every 3 mountain talisman will have a mountain market. It is just to relax and take a look at the scenery. In the vicinity of Zongshan City in Jiuquan, Ningyao Jingxiang will continue to travel far away with amulets. Chen Pingan raised his eyes and looked over, and found a big city built near Zongshan Gate in Jiuquan. It was 1,000 miles away from the mountains and rivers, but it seemed that he could smell the wine over there at this moment. Chen Pingan habitually squatted down, twirled the soil lightly, and said with a smile, Aliang said that there is also a chivalrousness in the wild world, and among the monks of the demon race, there are also heroes who are more human than people. He also specifically mentioned this to me. He said that as long as there is a chance to travel the wild hinterland in the future, he must come here for a drink. Lu Shen smiled and said, there is no small matter in the world, the heaven and the earth are true spirits, who dares to be contemptuous? The so-called mountain people are just chicken dogs. People come here and don't bark or beat them away. After, Chen Pingan concealed himself, and stepped out of 1,000 miles of ground, and arrived at the city under the eyelids of Jiuquan sect. He randomly picked a wine shop in an alley and his business was excellent. However, the Jiuquan sect monk is notoriously not fond of fighting. Besides, it is true that he can't do other monks in fighting. The Lord is an old fairyland who has been unable to break through the border. In the city, there are a lot of monster monks. Chen Pingan is not a stranger, and he also used a blindfold method to deliberately hide the long sword knight tour and the Taoist crown. Chen Pingan and the wine shop's shopkeeper ordered 3 jars of signature wine, a few dishes of wine and vegetables, and found a table to sit alone, poured a bowl of wine, raised the white bowl, sniffed, and squinted. It is indeed a good wine, the key it is cheap and good in quality, and only 1 snowflake money can take away 3 altars. Lu Chen asked tentatively, can I show up for a drink? Chen Pingan nodded. Lu Shen appeared in the wine shop with a mustard seed, no different from the young Taoist who set up a stall in Lizhu Cave. He was still very poor. Furthermore, there were several monks in a liquor store, but they were unaware of Lu Chen's sudden appearance. To be precise, it was like this young Taoist priest had already arrived at the liquor store. 2 demon cultivators who were incompletely formed wanted to join the table. Lu Chen slapped the table. Master Dao is like the kind of person who can drink at the same table with others. Chen Pingan was too lazy to care about this, so he asked for an extra bowl from the wine shop, poured a bowl of wine for Lu Chen, and asked with a smile, what is the saddest thing to steal? Lu Shen sat cross-legged on the bench, raised the wine bowl with both hands, took a sip of the wine, with a drunken look on his face, shaking his head and saying, of course it is stealing alcohol. Chen Pingan could not help but think of the past hometown affairs, the 3rd master of Baiyujing, in those years, under the guise of palmistry, often beating the small town women. The old people don't predict human affairs, but Zinanku can gradually plow. In the past, there was a Lizhu cave sky with 100 flowers and rich grass spirit. Both sides have their own minds, just drink silently. Chen Pingan drank a bowl of wine, and Lu Chen's bowl almost bottomed out, so he filled 2 more bowls. Lu Shen thanked him, glanced at the sky, and slowly said, Haosu is also a poor man. Chen Pingan is non-committal. Lu Chen said, of course, poor people must have hateful things, but the most hateful things, or the hatred of all the people in the world, it seems that it is not as good as Haosu who hates himself. In this way, the dead knot is truly insoluble. Up. At that time, he was a young man and was domineering. Haosu once determined to open up a real way to the sky for all sentient beings in his hometown. I never thought that the last man was just in the prison of the Great Wall of Jianqi, with the title of criminal officer, drinking alone, and the years were long, but he watched the full moon a few more times. Criminal officer Haosu, one of his natal flying swords was named Shan Wan. For thousands of miles, there is frost on the earth. Fighting for fame and fortune, spending money to buy the relationship between the government, just to live in the Shidian temple, have more titles, and the brothers in the same temple, but they have to die forever. I have seen it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears. Even the local people are very disapproving of them, but they still have to burn incense. I waited until I read this sentence in the book, and then I suddenly wanted to understand a lot of things. Maybe a real practitioner, I am not talking about the kind of genealogical master, but just these practices that are really close to the world, and the magic of the fairy family. It's okay. Cultivation is really just about cultivating the mind. I can't focus on cultivating. I think, for example, if I'm an ordinary master, I often go to the temple to burn incense, the 15th day of every month, year after year. And then one day I met a monk on the road, his steps are gentle, his expression is calm, you can't see his dharma attainments, his knowledge is high and low, he bowed his head with you, and then just passed by. Even if we meet again next time, we don't know. Once we met, he passed away, got the way, and left, we will just continue to burn incense. I once took millet grains to burn incense in a temple. I felt that I was going wrong. So I asked a monk for the way. The monk said that we were on the wrong side. After helping to show the way, he turned around and walked his own way. Xiao Mili still complained a bit. I didn't know how to help lead the way. I didn't say anything at that time. I just thought that if I were the guide, I might ask if I need to go with me. I thought about it later, maybe instead, I don't have the so-called wisdom root of Buddhism. Lu Xun did not interrupt, he just listened to Chen Pingan's self-talk. In fact, as long as Chen Pingan does not deliberately cover up, Lu Chen can hear and see clearly his thoughts, words, and emotions. For example, now, Chen Pingan just drinks and doesn't speak anymore, but Lu Chen seems to have seen pictures of landscapes. There is a Xinjiang temple near Owafuti Zhuangyuan Lane, and there is an aged host inside. He likes to speak advanced Buddhism and only talks to others. There is a disciple who inherits the position of abbot, and a little novice who likes to be lazy but kind-hearted. There is a middle-aged master of the Baiyun view of Qingyuan country in Aquarius, loves reading so much that it hurts his eyesight. The little road boy who sweeps the courtyard is sad every day. Because of the trees in the Taoist temple, Gaoji often hangs the paper kites, and he is blocked by the children's parents and scolded. It seems that he has never really heard his piece. Lu Xun whispered, the ancients' cloud school book is like sweeping fallen leaves, sweeping as you go. Chen Pingan unknowingly had finished drinking the drink in the bowl, glanced at Lu Qin. Lu Qin smiled and said, I still have it, so I don't need to pour it. We cannot believe in the Buddha or believe, not burn incense or worship the Bodhisattva, but we should believe in everything that can make us feel peaceful. The Buddhist scriptures clearly tell the world that worshipping Buddha means worshipping oneself, because the heart is the Buddha, all living beings have Buddha nature, the Buddha is the enlightened man, and the man is the unconscious Buddha. I understand the truth, but I just can't do it. I feel like I'm asking for something from the Buddha and Bodhisattva, making a wish. Chen Pingan stopped talking or even wandering all the way after saying this. He took a deep breath, drank the third bowl of wine in one sip, and put the remaining 2 jars of wine on the table into his sleeve. Lu Xun said, "Is this leaving?" In fact, he was really a little flustered right now. He always felt that Chen Pingan had finished saying these things in his heart, and maybe he had to do something near that wooding river and mountain city. Chen Pingan nodded. Lu Chen blinked his eyes with a curious expression on his face, and asked, "Why don't you try to drag the bright moon to the Howren world, or simply the colorful world? This is called fat water not flowing into the field of outsiders. Why do you want this? It's a great thing, let us give it to us for nothing." Chen Pingan glanced at him. Master Lu asked clearly, "It's boring, and the money for drinks will be counted back to me. If you can successfully drag the bright moon for a round, you can lose a piece of luck in the wild world. You can find a place to cultivate Taoism for Haosu." Lu Chen was originally the person who led Haosu to the Qingming world. At the same time, Chen Pingan and Taoist ancestors are also regarded as paying back gifts. As for Qingming Tianxian by Yujing, Chen Pingan does not care about how to arrange this round of the bright moon that has emerged out of thin air. At the same time, in the future, traveling far away in the Qingming world, with this merit, even if it carries the real name of the Great Demon, it is believed that it will reduce the victory of the Great Road in the dark. Can also make Qingming world disrupt the time of the wild world. Kills 5 birds with 1 stone. Don't look at the third master of Bai Yujing, his eyes were murmured and complained all the way, as if he was being led by the nose by Chen Pingan, but the third master of Bai Yujing was the real expert in business. Lu returned to the Lotus Dojo. Chen Pingan once again traveled far away with Amulet. Perhaps the relationship between the road and water, Chen Pingan felt a wave of water transport on his face. The Wooding River, which is dozens of miles wide, is just one of the hundreds of tributaries of the Luluo River. After Chen Pingan Jingxiang. Sort of coming Chapter 859. The update is late, 16,000 words. P.S. There is one more chapter tonight. Jiang Shangjin, who was wandering around in the wild world, met a group of monks who traveled far away from the world. As for Jiang Shangzhen's emergence of the Yin God, he is helping Senior Qing's secret to overcome difficulties together. If it is an accident to meet Feng Xuetao, it is even more accidental to meet this young man halfway through. In fact, Jiang Shangzhen's intention was to go to the nearest Tingji ferry and find Jingzhuzhong. But the so-called recent, it is equivalent to a continent separated by mountains and rivers. Chao Xiai, Fu Su, Yuan Zhao, Chun Qing, Su Bai, Yu Yufu, Gu Kan, Xiao Yaoguang, and a young monk who practiced closed mantra. As for the apologists of this group of people, Han Chaosa, who had nothing to do all the way, heard the situation mentioned by Jiang Shangjin, and immediately rushed to Tingji ferry to find a senior. One of her natal escape methods is faster than sending letters to flying swords. And this group of young people arrived at Tingji together before Lu Yuzhou and Huaiqian stayed at Tingji ferry, and the rest continued to travel far. Lu Yuzhou, who was known as a good-for-nothing boy, just took out 2 Lixiazu as the fastest ferry boat recognized by Howren. In Lu Yuz's words, what if one ferry breaks down on the road? Be prepared. I still have a Lixiazu anyway. In addition, he also gave away a few sets of warrior warp and weft armor, and piles of golden talisman, just like the stupid son of the landlord's family at the foot of the mountain. At the foot of a secluded mountain, Jiang Shangjin is giving these young people the reason why he was not busy and set off immediately was that Jiang Shangjin was hesitant to give out the 3 mountain talisman. Previously, Cui Dongshan improved the 3 mountain talisman, but it was too late to claim credit with his husband. In addition, Jiang Shangjin also needs to learn more about the enemy through Yinshin, and finally needs to make these young people understand a truth. If he really wants to rush to rescue Feng Xuetao, it is very risky. Looking at the 9 young people in a circle, Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "If you have any questions, please hurry up. If you don't want to go, you must say it directly. There is nothing to be embarrassed about. To be honest, I regret talking about this with you now." Chao Xi, the ultimate martial artist, the peak of return. Fu Su, the first disciple of Beta Shengxing in the middle, with a sword-raising gourd hanging from his waist, named 3. Yuanqiu, with a gentleman's jade pendant hanging from his waist. The newly appointed head of the Henku Academy is the youngest head of the academy in Haoran's history. He has compiled 3 Yijia at a young age. His name is awe-inspiring and one of the 10 young people in the world. The hometown is the Qingming world, but it has become the sub-sage. Pure, perfect in everything. She was a gas trainer and a pure martial artist, except that she was not a sword repairman, and she was of the same number as Chen Pingan. He made the list at the age of 16. Su Bai, like Chun Qing, is a young candidate from several places in the world. The ancestral home of Zhaoling, the schoolmaster, is the Master Su, who is known as the Sage of Characters, but not the Sage of the Confucian Temple. Su Bai is now a son of a soldier, proficient in chess, and nicknamed Su Xian. Yu Yufu, the pinnacle of Wufu in the 9 realms, the bottleneck. Gu Kan, Jing Zhezhong's close disciple. Zhao Yaoguang, a handsome young Taoist priest with a peachwood sword, Wang Ziji, a man of over 100 years old. The young monk, carrying a niche covered by cotton cloth, is the portable Buddha, who has been practicing closed mantra. Jiang Shangzhen feels that he is a red-lined Wilao, who contributed to this unprecedented match made in heaven. It is very likely, and there will be no one before and after. The 2 worlds in the future, if the accident is not big, these young monks and martial artists will be the group of people who can fight the most in the Haoran world and the wild world. It's like a street fight in a narrow road. Inside the young people, there are Jing Juzhong, the great master of Longhushan, Pei Cup, and the real person of the fire dragon. They confronted a future throne demon. In the end, the 2 sides rolled up their sleeves. Dry rack. Of course, before they made a decision, Jiang Shangzhen repeated the danger of the trip twice. Jiang Shangzhen said something to dig his heart out and drove them to the battlefield. Jiang Shangzhen took a great risk. Any young man stayed there and could not return to his hometown. For Jiang Shangzhen, Yinku Fudi, even Yuguizhang, Tongya continents are all a trouble. In the unlikely event that the entire army was wiped out, Jiang Shangzhen would not have to return to the Haoran world, and he would honestly be a wild man in the wild world. Chao Xi didn't speak much, and only said a word. When I arrived on the battlefield, I took the lead. Fu Su didn't say a word. Of course, he didn't want to go, but he was too lazy to talk nonsense. Fu Su wore a snow-white robe, and as the pioneer of Baidi City, Fu Su carried too much reputation. It's not the same as Chao Xi. On the road of martial arts, Chao Xi has shown an invincible posture since he was young, but on the way of cultivating, no matter how good Fu Su is, no matter how high his education is, it is like Tuo Yushan's sword repair Liz Hen, the Taoist priest of Bai Yujing, Shanqing, who would dare to say that he was riding on the mountain trail. Yu Yufu looked at the direction of the battlefield and didn't know what he was thinking about. In Jiang Shangzhen's opinion, the little girl had a very good manner and a very beautiful appearance. Catching and fighting on the mountain, the sword fairy Fu Su is the best, but if you say that the battlefield melee, Chao Xi, Yu Yufu, have been to the Great Wall of Jinchi, and fought in the battlefields of Fuyazu and Jinjiazu, they are the most qualified to say a few more words. Chunqing whispered, "It would be great if Chen Yingguan was here. She will feel more at ease." Although the 2 sides have never veiled their faces, is she in the mountain of the Prince of Nanyue, Caiji Mountain? I have seen a student of Chen Pingan, who can teach Cui Dongshan, must have a better brain and a stronger method. Gu Kan glanced at her pure green, and her impression of her improved a bit. Yu Ye's husband rubbed a seal on his palm. The side section is that the stone is in the stream, how is it not the mainstay? Qian was in the sky, and the fist still went to the sky that day. 8-character seal, woman Valkyrie, next to Qin Chao. Jiang Shangzhen suddenly raised his head and said with a smile, some of the tattoos are busy, and most of them don't care about us, everyone, this is not good news, why don't you think about it again? It turned out to be an extremely exaggerated vision of heaven and earth, just in an instant, in the daytime when the sun was shining, a moment of night appeared for no reason, as if the light of a barren world was converged into a line, in an instant. Point to the ruins of the ruins. Jiang Shangzhen looked up at the sky, rubbed his eyebrows, and had a headache. Chen Shan's his hometown, don't everyone say that the girl in Tsing Yi with a ponytail has a particularly good temper? But everyone present, even if they were aware of this vision, still no one had a slight remorse, and even Su Bai had firm eyes. Gu Kan's eyes are even hotter. Relatively speaking, only Chao Ci has the most indifferent expression. Jiang Shangzhen finally laughed and clasped his fists. Jiang is fortunate to meet the kings. 9 people each, and Jiang Shangzhen paid back. Bai Xian set up a table a dozen miles away from Luopa Mountain, because a pavilion was built here for people to rest. Bai Xian didn't know where he touched a purple sand handle pot and tied the dragon head. Bamboo style, Artie, a big boy, like an old man who is proficient in tea ceremony, sitting behind the table, with Erlang's legs, while keeping accounts, while sipping tea leisurely. Bai Xian raised his head and glanced at the outside of the pavilion. Before he saw anyone, he saw a blue sleeve. The sleeve was cracked by the master, and the dragon and tiger stepped into a breeze. Chen Lingjun strode into the pavilion, immediately turned his hands down, and walked slowly. Isn't this brother Bai busy? Bai Xian sat still, smiled and raised his hands, and greeted Chen Lingjun with a fist. It was a courtesy of real money and silver. Most people on Bai Xian's side did not receive this treatment at all. The main reason is that Chen Ling knows a lot and can talk very well. He talked to Bai Xian about a lot of strange customs and customs in the world, and the slang of the local customs. Bai Xian should not spend money to listen to people telling stories. What gods will ask land? Don't think of Lord Land as a god. Chen Ling knows all kinds of stove princes, anyway. Chen Lingjun stretched out his hand to hold the table, his eyes rolled, and smiled. Brother Bai, why don't you look for a handle pot, drink to your mouth, and be more proud? Bai Xian asked, what kind of pot with a handle? Are you particular? Chen Lingjun waved his hand, no need to ask, I'll give you a few when I look back. Bai Xian is a person who doesn't like to owe favors, but now he is shy in his pocket and has no spare money. Longkuan Shoal is gone, so he has to say, the money is owed first. Chen Lingjun's fingers bent, he slammed the desk hard, and stared at Bai Xian. What the hell? Brother Bai, do you know that talking about money between brothers at the wine table is like going over the wall in the middle of the night and touching the of a neighbor's wife? Not compliant. It's arranging. Bai Xian nodded vigorously, and there was a row of cleaned licorice roots on the table. Bai Xian used it as a broken mouth to eat, so he picked up one and handed it to Chen Lingjun. Chen Lingjun took the licorice root, chewed it in his mouth, flipped through the account book on the table casually, and asked, Brother Bai, what do you remember these? They are all outsiders who clearly cannot be a disciple of Luopa. Anyway, now that Pei Qian is not on the mountain, Bai Xian laughed and said, call friends, and the rivers and lakes will form an alliance. When the time comes, everyone will swarm up and beat Pei Qian. Of course, I, the leader of the rivers and lakes, will do things with a sense of measure. Say yes, no dead hands are allowed to avoid hurting peace. Chen Lingjun was stunned at hearing this Bai Xian, did his brain fool Pei Qian? Encircle Pei Qian. You are not committing evil, you are committing death. Just think about it again, maybe the old brother Bai is stupid. Bai Xian asked in a low voice, Brother Jingqing, that Guozhujiu is the little disciple of Master Hermit, are you familiar with it? Bai Xian's idea is very simple. Since the big white goose said that Pei Qian was afraid of Guozhujiu, as long as Guozhujiu was afraid of himself, even Bai Xian had won Pei Qian. As long as everyone is a sword repairer, Bai Xian will not be shocked to see anyone except Master Hermit. Chen Lingjun shook his head, I haven't seen it before. The little girl hasn't come to my side to worship the mountain. Bai Xian asked casually, go to Qilong Alley to find Taoist Jiao for a drink again. Chen Lingjun had already chewed up the licorice and swallowed it altogether. He laughed and said, the women have infinite skins with different colors, but they are generally good. I learned it from the Dafeng brothers. Bai Xian could not understand it all. Chen Lingjun leaned back on the table, arms around his chest, raised his head slightly, and said slowly, I have been diligently practicing the Taoism recently, and I have some feelings, and I will listen to you. Raise my head to 5 feet, and the fairy will take over to help me clear my talents and move across 3 continents, the more whirling, the more stable. I will drive the sky at the moment, it is true cultivation, jump the dragon gate 3 times to draw the water, the good mountains and the rain fly with me. The dragon is ever-changing, omnipotent, the world of human beings, the clouds and water are free, 5 colors sit in the middle of the xia, toss the hairpin to enjoy the blessing. Chen Lingjun waited for a long time, and found that there was no reaction from the old brother Bai behind him, so he turned his head and found that this guy was busy looking up and drinking tea there. He noticed Chen Lingjun's sight. Bai Xian put down the teapot, and said in doubt, did you finish? Forget it, Chen Lingjun doesn't understand it anyway, he borrowed it from the big white goose, it's really sour and silly. Chen Lingjun did not choose the bench next to him to sit on. Instead, he walked around the table and sat side by side with Bai Xian. Looking at the road outside, Chen Lingjun said with emotion, my master once said that there is an old saying here in my hometown, saying that he will sit on a sedan chair this year. The person who crosses the bridge may be the person who built the bridge in the previous life. Bai Xian was chewing on the roots of the grass, disapproving. In his hometown, no matter whether he is a sword repairer or not, he doesn't talk about this. Chen Lingjun continued, my master also said, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. If you don't believe it, don't believe it. You should live as you should. But if you believe it, that person, if he is living a life of happiness, that's a big deal. Spending more money will be able to make yourself feel at ease. Those who are struggling days will feel better in their hearts, and there will be so much hope in the days when there is no hope. Bai Xian finally understood these words. Chen Lingjun wanted to reach out to touch Bai Xian's head, and Bai Xian turned his head, how can you touch it? You can touch it casually. Chen Lingjun smiled and patted Bai Xian's shoulder, then raised his palm and shook, brother Bai Xian, don't you know, my hand is like it was opened. Bai Xianqi smiled and said, if you have the ability, touch Nuanchu's head. Chen Lingjun put on a predecessor's posture, and said earnestly, brother Bai Xian, it's because I'm not careful, otherwise you can't make friends with your mouth. Bai Xian raised his thumb, went around his shoulders, pointed to the Piyun mountain behind him, he said, you and Wei Shanjun, are you good friends? Chen Lingjun rolled his eyes. On the road came a young Taoist priest carrying a sword box, his appearance was so fair, in short, he was not like a Taoist master who was soaring through the clouds. The young Taoist stopped at the pavilion. Before he could speak, Chen Lingjun jumped up and rushed out with a thunder. He bent over to the bottom, clasped his fists, and was almost able to touch the ground. Ask Tao Master, is it a senior old in the 14th and 15th realms? Dare to ask Tao Master again, is it the great master Longhushan who is highly respected, looks up to the world, and is one of heaven and man? Bai Xian picked up the teapot and drank tea, opening his eyes. This old brother Jingqing, is that how he makes friends with people? You know what a fart, this is all my Uncle Chen's secret world experience. Zhang Shanfeng was confused, shook his head and smiled. Of course not, and the trail level is not high. Chen Lingjun was relieved. Just to be careful, he still did not get up. He just raised his head and asked tentatively, then dared to ask this talented young Taoist commander, which immortal mansion is the master of the mountain? Don't you have dazzling, the other party is really a little Taoist in the cave realm. Zhang Shanfeng smiled and said, the master of the trail is not very popular at the bottom of the mountain, not to mention it. Chen Lingjun straightened up, quickly wiped the sweat on his forehead, laughed and said, where does the little road leader come from? But still standing in place, as steady as a mountain, motionless. What if you are an expert from outside the world who likes to make jokes and deliberately slander people, wouldn't it be an accident? Zhang Shanfeng said, the trail comes from Beiju Luzhou. This time I am going to Luopa Mountain to visit friends. Chen Lingjun smiled and said, what a coincidence, I am the worship of Luopa Mountain. Friends from the rivers and lakes are still given to me honor, and got 2 nicknames. In the early years, Xiaobaixio in Yujianglang, now the Dragon King of Luopa Mountain, this one behind me my surname is Bai. He is my good brother, but unfortunately, we do not accept outsiders, let alone disciples. Zhang Shanfeng explained with a smile, the trail has a teacher, but am friends with your mountain lord. I made an appointment with him to go out together for a long trip. Chen Lingjun was stunned on the spot, his master's mountain friend. Zhang Shanfeng said, my name is Zhang Shanfeng, from Patafeng. Didn't Chen Pingon mention it to you? Bai Xian blurted out and said, Lai Difeng is the mountain on which the real fire dragon sits. The real fire dragon with magic skills is you. We, Beiju Luzhou, the top handle in black and white on the hill. Chen Lingjun knew right away that he was dead. Because this is a saying that Pei Qian used to talk about when he was young. At that time, Pei Qian yearned for the rivers and lakes. Pei Qian said hee, the millet grains are brilliant, so Cin Han. Nuanshu lowered his eyebrows, smiled and said nothing. Remove all the cockleburs on the top of Nuanshu one by one. Millet grains shook his head and grinned, I feel that my brain is lighter by several kilograms. Just as Pei Qian was about to scare the millet grains, he asked the old cook to make a big pot of chopped pepper fish head. As a result, Nuanshu looked like an unknown prophet, and immediately stared at Pei Qian and stopped the conversation. Pei Qian had to give up and patted the head of the millet grains as a reward. Today's millet grains are in a good mood. Unlike a few years ago, every time I miss a good mountain lord or Pei Qian, I don't dare to let people know. I only dare to talk to the Bai Yun who is passing by. There was a green bamboo stick and a golden pole on the knees of Millet, remembering something, grinning, and hurriedly stretched out his hand to cover his mouth, and said, Sister Nuanshu, let's go to Hongzhou town to play together. I know that place. It's very loud. Nuanshu smiled and asked, just the 2 of us? The millet grain scratched his face, a little embarrassed, of course there are still good people. Xiaomi Li quickly explained, it's not that I am timid, but that I have short legs, and I'm tired of walking thieves. I stand in the basket of the good man mountain lord. It's a little effortless. Nuanshu smiled and narrowed his eyes, and stretched out his hand to twist the face of the millet grain, that's it. The stream grows long and goes far away, and the vegetation grows tall and tall. The old cook said that children who have not grown up will put their hearts on their lips, and when they grow up they will put their hearts on their hearts. An unshaven man in a blue shirt appeared in the Hure town on the border of Daquan. Unfortunately, the familiar inn was no longer there. This made him, the accountant, a little disappointed. I heard that Zhongyang went to Yugwazong first and then to Zhongtulonghushan. I don't know if I meet next time, Zhongyang will be fatter and thinner. Anyway, she looks good. Don't know if they will meet again after the catastrophe, all suspicious in a dream. Today's Tonggishao mountains and rivers are really devastated and cannot bear to see. He thought for a while. Instead of going to Dafu Academy, he planned to go to the buried River Bio Palace first to see if he could get a splash of water, flour wine and eel noodles there. These years, he was really gluttonous. As for the goddess of water, whose surname is Lu Mingru, who dares to believe? Meeting the goddess of buried river water, in the lobby of Na Bio Palace, the old rules, sitting opposite each other, one person with a large basin of noodles. Water god Empress stepped on the bench with one foot. Brother Zhong, what's the taste? Is it better than the bowl of eel noodles back then? Other places do not bask in the sun or snow during the whole winter. In this respect, Chen Pingan is just a elm bump, but the problem doesn't seem to be about himself and Zhongyang. When he thinks of this, Zhong Kuei is ruthless. Take a sip of wine. Lu Ro widened her eyes, and said in shock, you can see this? Have you opened your eyes? Zhong Kuei took a sip of wine, shivered, and the chili was the wine. It was really invincible. It's not that Yao Jinji really likes Chen Pingan, how can I put it? It's a matter of urgency. The more you think about it, the more you will be unable to let it go. It is similar to burying a jar of wine, except that one is buried in the ground and the other is buried in the heart. Lu Ro will be suspicious. You are an upright gentleman who has been a bachelor for many years, and you still understand the love of these children who are all around? Zhong Kuei sighed, and the goddess of water also sighed. Zhong Kuei smiled and said, what are you sighing? Lu Ro helplessly said, I'm not young anymore, I'm worried about marrying. Fortunately, the 2 bowls of noodles were brought to the table again, at least not to worry about eating. After drinking and eating, Zhong Kuei got up and left, and Lu Ro didn't send it away. He was polite with his brother, only that he would come often in the future. The night was heavy, and Zhong Kuei wandered on the surface of the river at night, but there was a ghost who fell into a fairyland around him, the one who was found by Ning Yao at the beginning. After being detained by the Confucian temple, it was tossed and turned all the way, and finally was Li Xing personally distributed to Zhong Kuei's side. To tell the truth, it would rather stay in the cage than to get along with Zhong Kuei day and night, hit hard, kill Zhong Kuei and then escape. Not to mention that there is no escape, and in fact, no one knows who kills. It's not that Zhong Kuei's realm is high, but Zhong Kuei can't talk about the monk realm at all now. Similar to the borderless, the key is that Zhong Kuei just restrains ghosts, and that kind of suppression in the general sense. This ghost, temporarily named Gusu, looks like a fat man who thinks he is handsome. It sneered and said, I can talk to a little girl for so long, she still doesn't look good, and the most terrible thing is that she still doesn't like you, Zhong Kuei, it's really not me who said you. It's just a waste. The widow back then had 3,000 beauties in the harem. Just pick out a lady who looks more handsome than her. TSK, that figure, that hip pedal, that small waist and big breast, which one doesn't make people angry? Know what picture scroll is it more irritating than that? That is, they stand in a row, strip off their dresses, and then turn their backs to you. Zhong Kuei ignored the nonsense of the ghost. It's all right, wipe your saliva and talk. It's just that Gusu said something awkward to himself. Zhong Kuei said helplessly, don't break your mouth, can I beg you? Gusu walked on the surface of the buried river and spit. It's useful to ask someone for a fart. If the rebellious officials and thieves are rebelling, it works if you ask the widows not to kill. The pig squeezed in the corner and hummed 3 times. You are good, a boring gourd, you deserve to be a bachelor, put me, and saw that Zhonyang, afraid of anything, rush up and hug it, just gnaw it, cook the rice and cook it. This means that hungry dogs are not afraid of villains, and good women are most afraid of anger. Zhong Kuei couldn't listen, his mind moved slightly, and the fat man immediately fell straight into the water. After a while, he stood up with a carp, grinning, not pretending, and slapped the flowing firefly on his body. Gusu stepped on the water and didn't dare to use any magical powers. He just splashed some waves and said in grief and indignation, "Fuck, don't grab anything and lie down in the coffin. If you meet you, you will be a widow." Zhong Kuei asked, "I'm surprised, you are an emperor who has been born in hairpins for generations and then usurped the throne to establish the country. Where can there be so many vulgar and local dialects? It was once a hero in the history of Hauran. He opened up many territories in Fuyao continent and was almost snatched by him before the Song clan of Dai. He completed the feat of one continent being one country. He died suddenly. Before, it actually occupied half of the mountains and rivers of Fuyao Island." Gusu smiled and said, "You don't understand this. The widows have several concubines who are from the village women. Don't squint. They are all private visits. They only learn from their looks and a stomach. It's attributable to the sturdy purse, masculine, but not just money." Zhong Kuei cursed, "Why don't you die?" The fat man laughed and said, "Widows are originally ghosts, and they are almost dead and alive. Hey, having said that, there are too many ecstasy situations like this. In fact, the most invincible battlefield for widows is unfortunately not for outsiders. Only by teaching you a few skills and an invincible safekeeping place can you be considered worthy of walking in this world as a man." Zhong Kuei asked in his heart, "How did you know that person back then?" The fat man was silent for a moment, looked up at the sky, squinted his hands and said, "A widow is considered to have lived for 2 lifetimes. Whether he was an emperor before his death or cultivating after his death, he never felt that he was lost to anyone, and he rarely admired others, but that one must count means that Hauran Jiaxing, who later became wild and thorough." Fatty suddenly sneered again and again, "If it wasn't for Ning Yao." Zhong Kuei raised his hand, "Stop it, shut up quickly, and advise you not to say anything about Ning Yao in the future. It was heard by my good brother. It won't be enough for you to have one more life." Before going to extradite the lonely ghosts, Zhong Kuei suddenly glanced in the direction of the Daioakshuanshan site and muttered, "That kid is okay now." The fat man sneered and said, "I just found a good wife, what's so great?" Don't need Zhong Kuei to say anything at all, the fat man has already beaten his chest and feet, and said with a sorrow, "I envy the dead, this kid is an expert." Suddenly, the fat man stopped his voice and began to spit again. "A student of the Hanlin Academy, if you Zhong Kuei fell into my hands early, you won't be allowed to be an official even if you get the top pick in the exam." The reason why it is so heroic is of course that Zhong Kuei has swam far away right now, saying that it is not far away, like a step away, going to the other side, saying that it is close or not, the faint difference, the world is separated. On a dark road. The old ancestor of Xiandan City who walked through the sun, the ascended realm ghost Xianwu Cry, suddenly stopped moving. Wuqi had just started to kill a little bit, his body was like a raging fire, and his soul was like cooking in a frying pan, and Wuqi had to immediately dispel that wishful thinking. Because a young man in a bright red robe appeared in front of it, holding a jade wat in one hand and a pen in the other, and there was a book in front of him. The first sentence of this person was extremely arrogant, "You kowtow first, I will chat." Qing Mingtiangxia. A burly man and a handsome boy with a tiger head hat are now in the strange land of Qingming, doing old things in his hometown, visiting the mountains and visiting immortals. It is Lu 16, who has traveled through the Qingming world, and Bai Yi, who has just become a pure sword repairer at Xianduguan. Not long ago, Lu 16 hit Bai Yujing with a punch, and then dragged by to escape. At that time, the second Taoist who was in charge of Bai Yujing did not make an exception to investigate this kind of offense. Not only did he not use the sword, he didn't even mean to do it. It was just that the Taoist immortals on the 12th floor of the 5th city showed their magical powers. With that punch, just say one of the cities, and there will be Lingbao's grand atmosphere like a rainbow. In the end, Yu Dou just glanced at the horizontal tiger head cap boy from a distance. The second Dao's face was stern, and in the end it seemed that he still couldn't hold it back. A light smile. For the most proud of the awe-inspiring world, Yu Dou is willing to respect a bit. Otherwise, Yu Dou would not lend his sword to Bai Yi. At that time, Jiang Yunxing, who looked like a small Taoist boy, saw the expression of the second master teacher, as if he had seen a ghost in Bai Yujing. In the boundary of a dynasty Jiangyi, a heavy snow has just stopped. Walking in the snow, moonlight and snow are both good. During their travels, the two friends saw a different style from Howren's world. Taoist officials are both monastic masters and officials of the secular dynasty. There is a world, and there are Taoists everywhere. Taoism is the household registration that is superior to others. Whenever there was a flood in the jurisdiction, the local officials would use talisman to throw the river bank to break the place, or use the alchemy script to summon the gods to relieve the drought. There is that official holding a bamboo pole and crossing the horse and mountain. There are also Taoist officials who set up altars to cast spells to expel evil spirits, and the small pond is suddenly dry, and there is a small dragon entrenched in it. There are many deeds. Lu Shilu walked slowly on the snow, and beside him was a boy with a tiger head hat who was difficult to associate with the name Bai Yi. In that hometown, Bai Yi became famous during the Tianbao period. After practicing Taoism, he was hailed as Bai Yi's poem before there was a month. Lu Shilu took out a jug of wine and smiled. If you board that night ship, you might still meet some old people. The boy pulled the tiger head hat. It's all fake, it's not interesting. Lu 16 said, I plan to find someone, probably Dao Chang's son will help. The boy hummed, He'll open this mouth, so don't owe favors. A few years ago, near a Dukkha fish market, two foreigners opened a new restaurant. The shopkeeper was a handsome brother who taught a surname to Bai Yujing, and the boss wife was Yuan. Lu Tai here has always been in the mysterious posture of Yinshin, leaving his body to travel far away, and the woman who opened a restaurant and said she was the boss wife when everyone met, came from Sipai Foodie, named Yuaning, who has not yet entered the Taoist genealogy. The preacher is Lu Qi and Chao Group. They are only in their 20s, but they are one of the 10 young people in the world. When she was on the list, she was actually less than 20 years old. At that time, she had only cultivated the Taoism for 8 years, and she had stagnated in the state of staying for 6 years, and then climbed to the sky in one step and entered the Yupu state. She fell in love at first sight with Lu Tai. Lu Tai traveled to Sipai Blessed Land, rushing to the half-month-old marriage book. Lu Tai has always had no good expressions on Yuaning, because he does not like women who are too good-looking, and he has no confidence to grow old together. The two of them set up this restaurant together in Huainan County, on the 3rd floor, facing the river and mountains. It was Lu Tai who bought it for a big price. It used to be an inn with a deserted business. The scenery is beautiful and the screen windows open to the river. The water trees are green as hair. The restaurant is not far from the fish market. Lu Tai picks up various kinds of fresh seafood every morning on time, and he personally cooks and cooks. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. There is also a ferry crossing in the county town. If there are beautiful or gorgeous women passing by, they will be upset and wear women's makeup and clothes. In fact, there is no immortal family in the Qingming world. Anyway, the immortal master must have a genealogy of Taoist officials. I saw someone wearing Taoist gowns on the road, and I called him a master. It must be correct. The restaurant has several golden signatures, such as steamed mandarin fish, deep-fried water turtle, bridge rice noodles, and fresh pickled fish. Lu Tai also made friends with a group of mountain runners, so the restaurant has both fresh water and mountain delicacies. The price of the dishes is not only not expensive, and it is not expensive to the point where restaurants in the county town are jumping and cursing. There is no such thing in the world. Those who set up shops and do business don't want to make money, but just ask for not losing money. In addition to the restaurant, Lu Tai also hired skilled craftsmen from the mountain to build a waterfront pavilion, which served as a wine shop, surrounded by lotus flowers. Lu Tai often goes there alone to enjoy the scenery, and a leaf of a boat on the river floats by, like the story of life, going back and forth. Occasionally there are old men drying fishermen by the water. They are all fathers and villagers who ask for life, but they are not bold and open-minded hermits. Lu Tai occasionally left the pavilion and went for a walk to chat with them, a few homely. Because I learned that here, besides the officials who have obtained the genealogy, all counties with top 3 in high schools, especially the top 3, the county officials can be promoted to 3 consecutive levels, and the people in the county can be tax-free for 3 years as a reward. So Lu Tai ran to participate in the imperial examination, and in the end, not to mention the champion, not even a jinshi, the restaurant was still a big water table, entertaining guests from all directions. At that time, the shopkeeper Lu, holding a jade bamboo fan close together, held his fists in all directions. Laughing, Yuaning looked in a daze. Lu Gongzi is so pretty. Suddenly blushed, as if thinking of something, then his eyes firmed up and silently encouraged himself. Be sure to sleep, Lu Gongzi. He would use a pen of mutton fat and beautiful jade to turn the book, and he needs a glass bucket to eat. It can not only eat the essence and the fineness, but also can make a pot of tea, rice and wine. Therefore, Lu Gongzi is both elegant and elegant. Vulgar. In the early spring of this year, there is a lot of snow. Lu Gongzi often wears a folding fan around his waist, holding a green bamboo trekking pole, and likes to hike alone without her. In fact, for a cultivator, such a big mountain is really not enough. And every time after drinking and sipping, Lu Gongzi always likes to say something inconspicuous, similar to our high-rise building, facing the river and the mountains, the world is the best, but the 5th city and the 12th floor are no more. Why do you look for Baiyujing if there are thousands of mountains and valleys? It seems that there is no small resentment towards Lu Chen and Baiyujing. Yuaning didn't care about this, and only felt that she and Lu Gongzi were a God-sent good match. Only in the matter of eating, Yuaning was a bit embarrassed. Because of the relationship between the teacher and Chao team, she said it was easy when she was young. When she opened her mouth, she didn't feel strong, but she couldn't change it, and she liked eating garlic cloves when she was young. At first, Yuaning was a little embarrassed. He always felt that a daughter's family always liked to use garlic and pickled beans as a side dish, which was a bit inappropriate. Unexpectedly, Lu Tai likes her very much. If you say that, this is the only thing that is more desirable. Don't change it. In fact, Yuaning is extremely talented, and he is very good at poetry and melody. After all, he is a direct disciple of Lu Qi and grew up in the blessed land of Ci Pai. How could he lack the character? That's why Lu Tai always teases her, such good lyrics and music, whispering from your mouth, smelling of garlic. She once accompanied the landing platform on several trips to the fish market. She had seen him bargaining with the vendors. The red-necked and staring-eyed Lu Gongzi at that time became more and more handsome and messed up. Yuaning doesn't matter. Those Ying Yen Yen who entangled Lu Gongzi endlessly, a group of nympho, vulgar fans, don't look good than Lu Gongzi. Besides, they still want to be with me. It's 1,000 miles away. Did they help Lu Gongzi wash clothes? The two selections that I didn't know who fiddled with before selected several 10 young people in the world and 10 alternates. Although there are unavoidable controversies, they have been regarded as the two most convincing lists in thousands of years. Only said that she was in the blue underworld, no more, no less. In addition to Yuan Ying, there are also Deus's little disciples, the fellow with the name Shan Qing, and Lu Chen accepted his apprentices and went to Wucai Qianxia. However, he was so dying and provoked Fei Xingcheng. He was beaten by Ning Yao. There is also a pure swordsman named Shigu. The luck is very good. If he is out of the list a few years later, he won't have his share. I heard that I went to an unknown battlefield site, which is expected to break the bottleneck at the top of the mountain and become a martial artist. But the most talked about selected person is the guy with the nickname 22. As a disciple of the Taoist ancestor, Shan Qing has nothing to talk about. In the words of Dushuan Duguan Sun Dao Cheng, even a dog, tied to the door of the Taoist ancestor, can be a god. Yuan Ying's background was vague, because he wanted to talk more and didn't have a chance, plus he hadn't fought with anyone, chatting about, at most, he would go around that one step to the sky and repeatedly say some chaotic things, really meaningless. Taoist Wang Yuanlu, a line of rice thieves whose background is not recognized by Bai Yujing, is not a big no-no. But that Su Jun, not the same, is simply a fascinating legendary novel. He has a mediocre background and mediocre cultivating aptitude. He became a handyman disciple and a childhood sweetheart. He went to the mountains to practice together. He had better aptitude than him, and ended up being embraced by others. In the course of a later experience, in order to save the rivals including the lover, he did not hesitate to step forward and become a ghost for death, and disappeared. If the story in the book ends here, it will at most make some girls who are ignorant of love, take out a handkerchief, and a handful of bitter tears. Unexpectedly, when Su Jun appeared again, as a ghost, he won a heaven of heaven with a very high rank. He was born out of the sky, step by step, and soon became the lord of a sect. The hostile sect that lasted for thousands of years has turned fighting into a jade silk, and the methods are even more unexpected to break the head. Su Jun directly married the ancestor of that sect. That woman, Ming Dynasty Song, Dao title re-examination, is a pinnacle of Ascension realm. She was one of the 10 people in the Qingming world in her early years, but then she retreats, so that the sect master never saw her afterwards. One side. As a result, when she reappeared in the world, she married Su Jun, a man who was less than 50 years old, and the two became a couple. Such a pair of immortal couples is really too rare. The world was in an uproar. Even the invincible who likes to fight with people as soon as he shows up, Bai Yujing's second head teacher Yudo, made an exception to the wedding banquet to congratulate him, and he sat at the same main table with Sun Dao Chang, and neither of them started fighting. It can be seen how much faith Su Jun has. In addition, there are three-handed teacher Lu Chen on the main table, and an unknown female crown, but since she can sit at the main table, fools can guess what the Taoism is. A blue underworld, Su Jun alone holds 2 sections. Bai Yujing's 3 masters taught Lu Chen, Xian Du Guan Sun Huizhong, the sub-sage of the Confucian temple in the world, and the world's first person in alchemy. They all seem to have been quite optimistic about him, and each had the knowledge of teaching Taoism. Probably this is the so-called hard life and good life, and still be human. In fact, Su Jun is really not the kind of deep-seated man in the city. His ideas are simple, and often even a little naive. Since the ancient poets, the famous poets have turned brown clothes and yellow ribbons, and this is the only one. Yuan Ying was amazed. This guy named Zhu Lian, it is a pity that he didn't write poems by himself. Well, the small letters with hairpins in the book are also beautifully written. Lu Tai was closing his eyes and resting, thinking about the words of his ancestor. The sky is dry and things are dry, be careful of candles. It was originally Ruan Xiao who went to the sky. Gong Shen Huangquan, public don't blame God. It was the young boy Tian Jun in the drugstore in his hometown. Wind and snowy night. It means Chen Pin gone. These are all Lu Chen's words. The two preaching mentors of Lu Tai are Tan Tian, Zhou Zi and Haoran swordsman Pei Min. As for the sword repair Lu Kai. In these years, Lu Tai gets upset when he thinks of this name. Yuaning couldn't help asking, Master Lu, have you seen this Zhu Lian in Owa footy? Lu Tai put away his thoughts, smiled and shook his head and said, I haven't seen it before. It seems that he was taken out of the blessed land. According to Lu Qin, he became an old cook on the side of Luopa Mountain, almost like me. Unfortunately, Zhu Lian spent the whole year covered with skin, very stingy, not to feast the eyes of others. Lu Tai smiled and said, Yuaning, your affection is just following a red line of marriage, which is meaningless. Yuaning Ruru said, it's just a marriage relationship, isn't it good? Yuaning frowned slightly, looked up at the two people by the river, and reminded Lu Tai heartily, Yo, two great figures are here. It was actually that Su Jun, the Ascension champion who regained the Dao No. Lu Tai still didn't open his eyes. I like Qingqing, I'll go to bed, and casually said, this is such a great man, I'm afraid we can't hold our small eyes. Yuaning couldn't help being handsome. The world was no more than a pair of eyes. Who said that? The young man stopped more than 10 steps away from the pavilion, and hit a gate chief. Su Jun has seen Mr. Lu, Miss Yuan. Lu Tai raised the folding fan in his hand, it's too polite, I won't send it far. Yuaning just learned, waved his poem collection. If it weren't for Lu Gongzi, she would still get up and pay the courtesy. Chao Gu coldly looked at the young men and women in the pavilion. I am young, courageous, and a big heir. Su Jun patted her arm lightly, and she nodded without any movement. Su Jun always stood there and asked with a smile, dare to ask Miss Yuan, can the juniors see Mr. Lu in the future? Before Su Jun went to the mountain to practice, he came from a poor background and went to the market. He listened to a lot of Lu Qi's poems and admired it very much. Yuaning nodded and said, you must be able to see it. Su Jun smiled and walked away with a fist, and said heartily to the Taoist priest beside him, Lu Gongzi is a casual person, don't mind. Chao Gut smiled and said, as long as you don't mind, I don't care. Whether you manage a family or expand the sect, it is completely different from a person who is sullenly practicing. Lu Ji got annoyed when he heard these serious things, he raised the wine bowl again, and drank his head up. Lu Ji suddenly turned his head, Qi Tingji frowned slightly, the day and night that had just passed, the yin and yang went wrong, the world was terrified. This kind of vision is not impossible for the 14th realm great monk. Looking at the general direction, it seems that it was deliberately aimed at Guishu Tattoo. Lu Ji didn't care anymore soon, too lazy to think. In the group, there are both the scheming Qi Tingji and the young hidden official who does everything without any problems. It is her turn to bother her brains. At the wine table elsewhere in the wine shop, a monster monk's eyes lit up, raised his falsely, looked down, looked at the beautiful scenery below the woman's waist, and slammed a few times. There are big long legs. After covering your face. The friend at the same table immediately answered, it takes a lot of trouble to cover your face, and let the ladies lay down there. Lu Ji patted his thigh without turning his head, and said, come and touch it. A wine shop booed all around, slapped the table vigorously, for the monster monk who took the lead in opening the conversation. The shopkeeper of the wine shop is not surprised at this. After drinking wine, who is not a sword fairy, and drinking enough, is a new throne. The monster cultivator laughed and said, really? You begged me for this. Qi Tingji smiled and said nothing. This is something that Aoliang dared not do. Qi Tingji poured himself a bowl of wine. The jug had bottomed out. After drinking this bowl, he should go to the Wooding River. I don't know what Chen Pingan is asking for. The demon cultivator just got up, the long-legged woman was just drinking, but the sword light in the wine shop instantly became bright. Get up from the monk, cut from head to toe, like a knife, cut the body on the spot and divide it into 3. The rest of the drinking monks, or their heads were wiped by a light, their heads were cut off, or they were cut off. Except for the wine shop shopkeeper, who was still safe and sound, his legs were soft, and he had to press his elbows against the counter to prevent himself from slumping to the ground, so as to avoid a slight disturbance. The female sword fairy mistakenly thought it was a provocation. As for the other dozens of people who came here to drink, the monster monks were all dead in an instant. Injured by accident. Wrong kill. This is not the wine table of Jinchi Great Wall. Lu Ji glanced at the 2 empty flasks on the table, and said, check out. The shopkeeper of the wine shop is just an old monk in the Dragon Gate realm, with a dry mouth and speechless. Lu Ji took out a small summer coin and put it on the table. Drinking and repayment is too bad for character, Lu Ji can't do this kind of activity. When Qi Tingji got up, he found out a piece of Gu Yuqian, and said to the shopkeeper, go and talk to Zhou sect. I will help repay the wine debt that Aoliang owed here. Lu Ji smiled and said, if the money is not enough to pay the debt, wouldn't it be embarrassing? Qi Tingji said, more do not retreat and less do not make up. After that, the 2 sword repairmen rushed to the next mountain city. It is located on the top of a mountain on the bank of the Wooding River in the waters of the Yiluo River. At the foot of the mountain, there is a shrine with almost no incense. The mountain shrine did not dare to be built in a wide view. From the top of the mountain, it can be seen that within the jurisdiction of the Fuluo River, the status difference between the gods of mountains and waters. As soon as the 2 of them appeared, they saw a bizarre picture, the water hung high, reflecting thousands of miles of green mountains and rivers, and the water nets in the air were staggered, like a towering tree collapsed, and hundreds of branches were crawling together. Every branch of the river that leaves the riverbed waterway and is dragged in the air and spreads is a tributary of the river. Qi Tingji's sword lifted into the sky, looking far away, looking down the trail of the main river. I saw the old throne, the big demon Fei Fei, but the real body of the demon clan was not revealed, she just relied on sitting in the small world and water law. Divine power, offering a majestic figure that seems not to lose the height of the lotus crown Taoist. The figure of Fei Fei, the position of her feet are 2 buildings that are far away from the river and water palace. She stepped on the 2 roofs. The ruins at the feet, the bright yellow and green glazed tiles on the ground were broken. Fei Fei bent her knees slightly at this time, stretched out her hand to grab the hanging trolling river, and leaned back. She is a young woman with scarlet eyes and a robe named Water Vessel. The thousands of warp and weft threads are all rivers refined by her, both in the wild world and in Tongye. Tonic over there. A white wrist is tied with a string of golden bracelets, refined from dozens of dragon genus natal gems, rippling with green ripples, like rings of divine treasures. There is a pair of embroidered shoes on her feet, with 2 huge liju adorned at the toe of the shoe. At this moment, the liju is frantically competing with the human law for water transportation and dragging down the river water transportation steadily. In the wild world, certain avenue battles are extremely cruel. The small fish eat shrimps and the big fish eat the small fish. The monks who are on the top of the avenue, it is best to have a climbing avenue behind them. Travelers, at most, there are some non-threatening existences on the side of the mountain, and then they are densely clustered at the foot of the mountain. When they are hungry, they go down the mountain, and when they are full, they will be refined into their own great luck. In the past, Yangji and Feifei split the wild 80% of the water transport. As a result, no one was able to join the road to the 14th stage, and the two sides stagnated at the peak of the ascension stage for thousands of years. Hanging rivers were torn apart on the spot by the two sides. Heavy rains caused floods everywhere on the earth. But every water that landed, the water transport has been divided up by the two sides, and they poured into the Taoist sleeves and the toes of the Feifei shoes. Lu Ji came to Qi Tingji and said, "In this comparison, our sword repairers are fighting, and it is really not good enough." Qi Tingji joked, "How come it's like a country Tian Rong grabs water?" Lu Ji nodded and said, "No wonder our hidden officer is so good, dare to return to the old business." Feifei furiously said, "Chen Ping'an, I have a grudge against you. Do you have to come to Luluo for trouble? If it is replaced by a sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, even if it is the engraved old sword fairy of Dong Sanging and his like, even if the sword is sharp, the water transport of the dragging river will eventually be damaged, even if more than 100 rivers are disturbed by the sword Qi shredded, but after all, sword repair can't take water transport. At most, it will let Fei Concubine spend hundreds of years in her path, delaying her broken realm, and Fei Concubine will go to another place to grab water transport and tear down the east wall to make up the west wall. If Tuo Yuashan did not stop her, she could always make up for the consumption. She never thought that encountering this young hermit who seemed to be born on the avenue of water would actually have an avenue battle with her to stop the wife and aunt. Fei Concubine's fascinating concubine grasped the turbulent tiling river, pulled back vigorously, gritted his teeth and said, "If you have the ability, go to Tuyua Mountain to sprinkle." Once Fei Fei Dao is water, and besides, she is still an old throne big demon, her eyesight must be higher than that of Zuampa's half-hanging ascended realm. It is certain that the true body of this 10,000-foot Dharma is the last hidden official Chen Pingon. As for how Chen Pingon became a 14th-level cultivator, Fei Fei was not interested in asking the bottom line. She just cursed Tuashan in her heart, and even allowed this guy to go deep into the barren hinterland. Next to Qi Tingji and Lu Ji, there was a purple golden lotus hovering on each other, and the spiritual energy gradually dissipated, as if it was just enough to support a fragrant time. During this period, they helped the two sword repairs to isolate the secret. Must be Lu Chen's handwriting. Ning Yao was standing on the Wooding River where the river bed was already dry, and beside her, there was also a lotus flower slowly rotating around her. Participated in the discussion at the Qin Turkish Confucian Temple. Chen Pingon actually said that since he returned to his hometown, he didn't care about anything. Anyway, he didn't care about it, he just took care of his practice. It turned out to be good, but it's really hard work. Taoists' Great Dharma, and the Fei Fei joined forces to gather hundreds of rivers in the waters of the descent into the main river, stretching them into a long suspended river of tens of thousands of miles. The Taoist began to step forward and walk forward, with both hands continuously wrapping the main road like a rope around his arms, strangling countless water spirits among them. A Taoist priest in Tsing Yi with a misty figure and a vague face, standing on one shoulder of the Taoist Faxiang in the crown of the lotus, holding the tail of the whisker in his hand, swiping the dust, and pointing towards the river mansion in the distance. Smiled and said, "Luo Tianzhong will leave the stars again, the stars will return to their positions according to the edict, and the edict of the sun and the moon will be reborn." In the hundreds of dry riverbeds in the waters of the Luluo River, there have been erected green bamboo poles, as many as 3,600 bamboo poles, just in line with the number of Luo Tiandajiao, which is the highest in Taoism. A little bald novice monk riding a fire dragon, with a long sword hanging on his waist and a page of golden scriptures, standing on the head of the fire dragon, his hands folded, and silently said, "The Dharma walks into the world and acts as a lion among the crowd." Following the law, a golden lion as big as a mountain, full of energy after landing, raised his head and roared, smashing countless ghosts and charms of the dangling river. This lion, which borrowed the Dharma, leaped towards the face of the Fei. In these visions of heaven and earth, an inconspicuous figure descended from the sky. It was pulled by the chi machine on the way, changed its trajectory a little, and came to a wild suburban ridge on the edge of the Luluo River. It was the criminal officer who returned to the world from the moon. Vegetarian. A avatar of Lu Qin, sitting on a tree trunk, dangling his legs, admiring the battle between the young hermit and the Fey concubine from afar. Since ancient times, people have been busy, and the third master of Baiyujing said, "This wisdom is in the eyes and 10 directions, and this wisdom is in the 3 lives." The 10 directions of the 3 generations are immeasurable, and the hands and eyes can show thousands of kinds. If it is magical, waiting for the water and moon, it is clearly visible. If a person sees a bodhisattva, a person is a child of a bodhisattva. Hao Su became more and more puzzled, that Zuampa's ability to kill is so poor. He was completely killed by Wu Qi within less than a stick of incense. Xuanpu was not able to escape the patriarchal. How does this ascendant realm great demon feel like a vast Nangwangwang in the world? According to House's impression, the ascended realm great monks in the wild world can still fight very well, even if the killing power is not outstanding, at least they are good at running. Lu Qin slapped his knees with his hands and squinted his eyes and smiled. Isn't the age of the fairy hairpin city bad? One crop is not as good as one crop. You haven't seen that fairyland silver deer, it's even more papery. No way, if you say it. Hauran's craftsmanship in the world is that the disciples of the church starve to death the master, so on this mountain, it is often the disciples of the church who kill the master. The old one will hide a few hands on the bottom of the box. Anyone who is small will try to secretly crack the vow made in the patriarch hall in the early years. That's right. Anyway, it's not a human being. Why should I believe in the human heart? Hao Su glanced at both sides of the tug-of-war, and asked casually, when will we play the sword? Wouldn't we just watch the play like this? Lu Qin glanced at the Fei's face in the distance. Don't worry, just wait for the hermit to find the right time to give an order. At this time, Fei's sister is still more cautious, there are still a few retreats. It is probably hidden. The official asked you not to run in vain, and then began to make plans for Lu Ji. Didn't you want to engrave on the head of the city? If you can kill the old throne Fei with one sword, go back to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and engrave the word Lu. It's great to engrave this character, absolutely. I'll talk to Sister Lu later, as long as she is willing to engrave the character Lu instead of the Ji, the sword box won't have to be returned. Lu Shen sighed Qi, rubbed his chin. Unfortunately, there are opportunities for engraving, but it may not be possible. If you want to cut the Fei concubine who is temporarily the co-lord of the world and water transport, naturally it cannot be that the swordsmanship is not enough, you may be almost lucky. Hao Su remembered something, and then asked, since the silver deer have been picked out, why didn't Chen Pingon find the opportunity to kill the ghost and fairy Wuzi? It's not that Hao Su was greedy for this battle, but just because of the grievances between Xianyan City and Jinchi Great Wall, and logically speaking, Wu Qi would never be let go. Lu Qin explained with a smile, Xuanpu is a thing, you must die. It is a disaster to let it stay in the fairy hairpin city. Wu Qi is more dispensable. A ghost and immortal who can only stay on the path of the dark and dying. It's not enough to let us have extra branches during this trip. Moreover, Chen Pingon has his own considerations. Insert an app, a perfect re-engraving of the old version of the book-chasing artifact, an app that can change the source. Hao Su suddenly asked, what kind of person is the real Lu Qin? The 3 head teachers of Baiyujing in front of him, and the one who traveled by boat to visit the immortals in the world, may still be connected to the road, but his words and deeds are quite different. So Hao Su always suspected that the Lu Qin in front of him was not Lu Chen's real body at all. Lu Qin hugged the back of his head with both hands and gave 3 sentences. Green water travels on a boat, green mountains passers by, thousands of years were the world and go to immortals, ride the white clouds to the emperor's hometown. This is Lu Qin talking about his path of cultivation. If he doesn't want to be mixed up in the Haoran world, then change his place. The hometown of the cultivators is the place where Taoism rests. The mediocre people are disturbing themselves, and the mountains and trees are also inferior. Although the world is great and there are so many things, but I know the wings and concentrate on it. This is probably Lu Chen's perspective on the world. Hiding the world under the sky, and being a disciple with the sky, is a real person. This may be the root of Lu Chen's avenue, but it seems that no one outsider can learn it. A tug of war. The tall Taoist figure has already taken away 40% of the water transport in the Luluo River. Lu Xintutade, a native monk in the wild world, plus us outsiders, the 14th realm great monk, seems a bit too much. In addition to Lu Qin himself, there is also the great ancestor, Shao Yan, who has returned from the sky and rebelled against the Great Wall of Sword Qi. The old blind man who continued to help each other, Chen Qinglu, the sword repairman who was a dragon slayer, and Wu Shuangjiang, a military monk who only came here to travel. Of course, there is also a hidden beta Shengjing Juzhong. If there are no flaws in Lu Chen's deduction, it is very likely that there will be an additional 14th level sword repairman in the wild world. It is a brand new Zhong Yuan, specially used by Tuyuashan to target Aliang and the left. Is the assassin of Tuyuashan, it must be Wen Hai's key follower carefully left in the world. Which type of Qi trainer in the world can best kill the Ascended Realm sword repair? Very simple, it is pure sword repair in the 14th realm. What's more, in fact, there is actually a great monk of the 14th realm peak who has never set foot in the wild mountains and rivers for thousands of years. White Pond. This time Bai Zhe will choose to stand in the wild world, without any suspense. Lu Qin stood up suddenly, sighed, "Go, since you can't kill Fei Fei, please reserve some strength to do bigger things." Hao Su frowned and said, "Why?" Chen Pingan clearly has completely dragged the Fei Fei, leaving Yiluo without a sword. Lu Qin didn't give an answer. Sword of Coming Chapter 861. This chapter was uploaded late. P.S. There is another chapter update on 15th. Chen Pingan holds a sword in his left hand. There is a big mountain blocking the way. Previously on the side of Xiandan City, Chen Pingan's Taoist style did not use any swordsmanship. He chose to shake Gaoqing with his fists only to remind Bai Yujing that the 3 heads of teaching, both sides actually still have old accounts that have not been calculated. Later, Lu Qin drew a knowing picture with a cicada attached to the front line. Isn't it a courtesy, implying Chen Pingan that he wants to pass the sword on to Yue Mountain successfully, and the long sword knight tour of the fairy rank is still not enough. Change 1. This is Chen Ping Ans in that fairy hairpin city. He couldn't help but remember the scene when he was young. Because he never deliberately concealed his emotions, Lu Qin borrowed a 14 realm of Taoism, so he had to send it under the fence and inhabit Chen Ping's soul, as if he saw a picture. The slowly spreading scroll of time reveals the scene of knowing the picture, hand-painted by Lu Qin later. No problem. After traveling to Bai Yujing, even the second son of Taoism, who is known as the true invincible, will not miss it. Thinking back that year, on the way to travel far away from home for the first time, the young Chen Pingan wore straw sandals and held a hatchet, accustomed to making way for others to enter the mountains. There was a question and answer when confronting Gaoyue, who was later known as Sui Shan. She asked Chen Pingan, "What if there are mountains blocking the road?" At that time, Chen Pingan's answer climbed over instead of taking a detour. She asked if there was a sword in her hand. Chen Pingan just said to start the mountain. Walk. That time, before Chen Pingan handed over the sword, when both sides uttered the two characters together. The long sword in the young man's hand trembled frantically. Like a lonely Tibetan for thousands of years, on the tallest branch in the world, it blasts to heaven and earth. There is Tuyu mountain in front of you, towering into the clouds. In the early years, this mountain was unable to be refined after being obtained by the great ancestors of the wild. In the end, it was only refined into a mid-refining natal thing, and Tuyu mountain, facing Taiwan, is all in harmony and has been standing in the world for more than 10,000 years. The wild great demon who sits on Tuyu mountain now is a man in yellow clothes standing on the top of the mountain. The culprit of the Taoist name, that is, the first mountain guard in Tuyu mountain's history, was exactly the time when Master disappeared. He is responsible for guarding a world. As the new Makeup and Lishen brother, the pioneer of the wild ancestor, the culprit is not well known. He rarely left Tuyu mountain, and later he never appeared in Jiazhang and Haoran world. So that the whole barren world simply became the first disciple of the great ancestor, no longer exists. The culprit was standing at the highest point of Tuyu mountain at the moment, with his hands folded, overlooking the young hidden official who single-handed the sword, and then glanced at the divided sword repairers. Let them just take out the sword. This Ascension Realm pinnacle great demon really didn't believe that the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Chi could chop off a famous hull. Unless these 4 sword repairmen are from the Great Wall of Sword Chi, they can cut more than 10,000 swords, and they must be successful in swordsmanship, and they can open the mountain every time. The culprit of the big demon has been in harmony with the mountain for more than 10,000 years. That's why I stayed simple and never showed up. That young Chen Pingan has only been a pure sword repairman for a few years. It's only a few years since Hedao half the Great Wall of Sword Chi. The culprit, the guardian of Tuyu mountain in the past dynasties, only dealt with outside the mountain, and was responsible for secretly gathering the souls of the Dragon Lord and the Watch. In the questioning sword 10,000 years ago, Chen Qing paid the price of losing his life, flying sword, duckweed. There is no record of that scene, that is, Tuyu mountain and the Great Wall of Jianqi. There is no written record of the reasons why the 3 sword repairmen produced the sword, how the sword was produced, and the final result. Otherwise, it does not matter now. Which monk in the world, is it a sword repairer? As long as he turns on this page of the old almanac, he will feel a billowing sword aura. Within tens of thousands of miles in the radius of Tuyu mountain, the sky was turned upside down, the mountains and rivers were broken, and the sword chi was forcibly stirred into a place not suitable for cultivation. Tuyu mountain was directly cut in half by Lord Long, and only then did the newcomers of Immortal Hairpin City come to the top and become the highest city in the wild. Observing the last sword in his lifetime, he chopped out the rudimentary form of the trailing river in the wild future generations. At the same time, Chen Qingdu smashed the road to ascend to the sky with a single sword. The greater consequence was that Chen Qingdu made the great ancestor of the wild, even after 10,000 years, still failed to enter the 15th realm, and was only one step away. It ended up being a ridicule by the old blind man, maybe because of his lack of monastic qualifications. Long Jun lost his soul and 2 souls. Whether he was discussing matters in the Hall of Valor or the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, Long Jun only showed his bleak image in a gray robe. Ahead is even more so Bai Ying, who is high above the withered bone throne by the great demon of the old throne, whose true identity is the body of the Yang Xin who is well conceived, just stepped on her feet. As for Liz Hen's predecessor, Jian Xiu Guanzhao ended up worse than Long Jun. The veritable body died and disappeared. The real body was completely annihilated after the end of the questioning sword, and the soul was scattered across the world. Later, it was searched by the guardian of Tuyu mountain. After reaching the most critical soul, and then stitching together the remaining souls, there is now the new heavenly court armored person. Therefore, the great wall of sword qi was divided into two by the wild ancestors, Chen Qingdu, Long Jun, Guanzhao, and the three swordsmen. In a sense, it was actually a weird long-distance reunion. Qi Tingji took out a sword workshop standard long sword from his sleeve, and used it to hand out the first sword to pay homage to the old sword immortal, as well as the two seniors who were 10,000 years ago, Long Jun and Guanzhao. Ning Yao was innocent holding one of the four fairy swords. After the criminal officer Hao Su sacrificed his destiny-flying sword, within 100 li, it was like a moon mirror lying horizontally on the ground. The sky was full of frost, and only Hao Su stood in it. Lu Ji couldn't bear the two swords of Nan Ming and the ease of use. Moreover, these two swords were not suitable for cutting mountains. Even if the blade was rolled up and the long sword broke, he had to stay at the end. The two Taoist swords of Nanming and Yi, Lu Ji stepped on a large formation of Nanming Tianqi that Taoists called the Abbot of Tianqin, and a herring was born, with ease, taking the water transport out of thin air and taking out the long sword. The centipede is the high-quality legacy of a female monk in the Ascension realm of Baiyujing. In order to pursue more handing swords, Lu Ji had to endure the awkwardness in his heart and put it on his body, and his heart instantly felt a little acquainted, as if he was given a magical power. Lu Ji has already mastered the two superior methods of Baiyujing. After thinking about it again, she took out the autumn water and chiseled mountains that she had previously used in Baihua City, and then took out the mountains and trees and deliberately, hovering at her hand, which was convenient for cutting off. When all the 8 swords in the box were taken out by Lu Ji, once she fully used it, it turned out to be a whole set of sword formations similar to the Dao sect sword immortal. It was more than a combination of offensive and defensive, and it was simply a mobile world where the avenue revolved on its own. Like a Taoist saint who can take a Taoist temple to travel far between the world, a soldier and a monk can carry the entire battlefield ruins around. She nodded. She didn't make a mistake before, and Lu Chen's Taoism was really interesting. The monster cultivators of Tuyua Mountain, without exception, all have their heartstrings tense. Both sides of the hostel are only qualified to show their faces when they ascend to the realm. Whoever mixes will die. It's okay if Tuyueshan keeps it, but if you can't keep it, you can only wait to die. Chen Pingan suddenly clenched the long sword in his hand, and said silently in his heart, "Go with you to open the mountain. When you meet the fairy hairpin city, you will destroy the city, and when you meet Yiluo, you will tug of war. Then when you meet Tuyua Mountain, you must move the mountain." Chen Pingan showed a great picture. A sword cut the long river of time away. In addition, the 4 swords of light from Qi Tingji, Ning Yao, Lu Ji, and Hao Su slashed the mountain. After one sword, the big demon prime culprit standing on the top of the mountain collapsed, but instantly merged into one, as if all those swords had failed and never landed on Tuyua Mountain. Those savage monster monks who had to watch from the wall had no time to applaud the culprit's means of reaching the sky. They found that in a mountain, there were countless sword qi in the sky like a rainbow, the mountain-top sword qi pouring like a waterfall, and the mountain-foot sword qi flowing back like a flood. Hiding, avoiding unavoidable, there are more than 100 monster sword repairers in an instant, and there are still some life-saving methods outside the fairyland, and within the Yupu realm, they were all strangled on the spot, all turned into parts and taken by Tuyueshan the heaven and earth aura. Until this moment, there were several fairyland demon races who were here as guests. After realizing, they understood why Tuo Yushan's direct disciple had long disappeared. It turned out that the culprit seemed to have expected such a sword. The calamity brought by Zayuwenjian. Only after the tens of swords, except for the culprit at the top of Tuyua Mountain, and a handful of immortal realms, there were no surviving monks in the mountain. The culprit who had been slashed by the young hidden officer's body again and again stood still. This ascending peak great demon was born and died a dozen times in the detached posture of a person without boundaries. Tuiyue Mountain is like a cultivator who has accumulated thousands of years of Taoism, and can only be moved to the top of the mountain after being opened thousands of times in succession. If the culprit is temporarily invincible, then the sword bearer in the culprit's field of vision is a higher posture of invincibility with a sword. The culprit glanced at the golden eyes of the young hidden official intentionally or unintentionally. Lu Qin stood in the Lotus Dojo, widened his eyes, looked around, and shouted in his heart, "Hey, hey, is that one really you?" Xiao Dao Lu Qin, so hard, cheeky and gloomy around Qin Pingan. It's like letting the contending for oneness to rotate in situ, and follow Qin Pingan to hit the wall together in the cage. Shui Huang and Qi Jingchen ascended to the sky by careful consideration, and entered the ruins of the old heavenly court. It was an invitation to enter the urn. Never thought that there is a different kind of cage in this world, waiting for thoroughness. Wen Sheng is in the same line, 3 senior brothers. They are ruthless to themselves. How so? Probably all 3 of them have a hope for this world. It is not that the world is beautiful enough to give people hope, but it is precisely because the world is not good enough and there is no small matter in the world that we need to give more hope to the world. Lao Guanzhu curiously asked, Shomi instructed the culprit to stand still with Tuo Yuashan stupidly, and let Chen Ping's sword chop 10,000 times, just for the sake of the sword handing to break the divinity that flowed away. Dao ancestor nodded. To deal with smart people, often only stupid methods are useful. As long as Qin Pingan thinks he is a sword repairman, he is destined to be unable to bypass the Tuiyue Mountain. The master of the old viewer stretched out his hand to pick up a handful of water, and gently shook his palm, so as to measure the weight of the rituals and rules of the saint and Hauran. In this way, Qin Pingan might be the first to become the target of public criticism than Yudo. Wu Shuangjiang once sent a message to Yudo, the second son of Taoism, that if a monarch does not cultivate morality, the way to die is also. Because the people in the boat are all enemy nations. The old master sneered, the ancient meritorious saints made great contributions to the greatest transformation, taking the world, and gaining it with the hearts of the people. Today's Shomi wants to take the world from the sky and the lives of people. Dao Zhu smiled and asked, You said that Hauran Jiaxing, what was thinking the moment he crossed the Great Wall of Sword Qi? The old Guanzhu replied casually, It's about the fact that the fate is reversed, not the world's tolerance. This scholar has a higher heart than the sky, so there is only one way to go to the sky. I guessed the Sword Qi not long after the Great Wall. Shomi must have looked up at the sky, sure that that high place is where his heart is. The old Guanzhu released his hand and released the water in his palm back into the sea. If Qin Ping's really moved the mountain and the sword was the culprit, would the city be engraved? What characters? Ping, and plus Qin sheet engraved earlier. If he can still cut another head of the Ascendant Realm, he will get his name together by this kid. Only by this matter. In the next 10,000 years, then his name Qin Pingan will probably be bigger than Yudo. Within the long river of time, there is no hovering boat completely moored. So naturally there is nothing right and wrong. Qi Jingchen studied at the Lizhu Dongtian Academy in the past years. What he really asked for was this matter and this thing. Zhoumi seems to be talking to himself, the so-called confluence of the 3 religions, trying to establish a religion and proclaim the ancestor. That would be too small for Qi Jingchen's ambition. But unfortunately, it is contrary to my path and is not a fellow man. What Qi Jingchen really asks is that he hopes that a small group of monks will emerge first, and then a large group of monks will emerge on the earth, as if to make a new climb to the sky, so that both the mountain and the world are worry-free, and those who climb the mountain will become a distant traveler. Beyond the sky, really pursue the road. And this is in line with senior brother Cui Yang's pursuing a larger chessboard. It's just that the first one that started to operate has been in the hands of the old heavenly co-master. The thing that Dao ancestors were looking for was this one, and he finally named him Dao. I have looked for it, and even saw it with my own eyes, but still can't catch it with Daosist Taoism, and it is fleeting. Taoist ancestors have seen it 3 times in total, and even saw the earliest movement of the great Tao brought by the One brought, so Taoism has the language of 3 lives and all things. It was a scene beyond the imagination of the monks. It was both magnificent and terrifying, simple and mysterious, and it was impossible to describe its appearance or describe its beauty. Beyond all existence, size, and reality, all the words in the world have become obstacles to explode. Whether it is the Taoist or the Buddha, in order to preach to the descendants and tell the origin, it is necessary to neither write nor explain its meaning in detail, because the more words there are, the further away from it. Zhou Mi turned his head and glanced at the woman standing on the railing. Following her sight, she saw the wild world, the white flower city that was completely reduced to ruins. Li Jin said in amazement, as expected, I am the Humitsama I admire the most. When crossing the border, there is no grass. The sect master whose god was forcibly dispelled not only fell from the immortal realm, but also teetered from the Jade Pu realm. This kind of damage to the Dao's fundamental damage was not an easy thing to kill Dao Xing for decades and hundreds of years. It took the great risk of being kept waiting for the rabbit and sneaked back to the top of Zhongmen Mountain. After roughly determined that Qi Tingji and Lu Ji had traveled far, it gathered the old department, but there were only some unusable shrimp soldiers and crabs left, and it went shopping. Several treasuries finally sat on the steps at the gate of the mountain, feeling like a knife, and most of their own sect title could not be kept. These sword immortals from the Great Wall of Sword Qi were more ruthless than each. Chopping melons and vegetables is cruel enough, I never wanted to search more cruelly. I only heard that the young hidden official was able to stand in front of the old thrones on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Jianqi in the past. But I never heard that Qi Tingji and Lu Ji are so greedy for money. Another mountain city, the ruins of the ancient battlefield, encountered Ning Yao's sword, Qi Tingji's soul-raising flags, and thunder and lightning bamboo sea. A female ghost in the Golden Core realm who had escaped 2 catastrophes was not killed by the sword. And Qi Tingji was not paid into the banner, she was suddenly surprised, and only when she surveyed the altar room, she unexpectedly gave birth to a natal flying sword. I saw the embryo of a pocket flying sword in the natal room, shaped like a green bamboo, like a bamboo with beautiful appearance, tall, and there are faint thundercloud patterns on the bamboo joints. It is as if one drink and one peck, there is definite determination. Suddenly she knelt on the ground, and the place where Ning Yao was handing the sword in the air and the top of the mountain where Qi Tingji stood, each knocked 9 sturdy heads. In the wild world, this has been regarded as a great gift of apprenticeship. This female ghost with the pseudonym Coriander, when she bowed her head and knelt down, she thought of words in her heart, and made 2 wishes with her sincerely. When Na Ning Yao made the sword the first time, Coriander had actually planned to kill her by pulling her neck and standing there, but for some reason, those sword cheats seemed to have been ordered by the master, and they all bypassed her. As for revenge, in this lawless battlefield site, there are fierce fights almost every day, and each other is enemies, even if it is the hundreds of ghosts and spirits under her command, who doesn't have hatred with her. Diyue Qingshan, a line of sword repairs passed through the border, still safe and sound. In the study, Shanjun Biwu took out a forbidden geomancy map of the barren world, which was drawn by Biwu privately. The various sects, mountains, waters and luck, will light up different degrees of brilliance on the situation map. Biwu was surprised to find that the White Flower City, the Cloud Pattern Dynasty, and the Fairy Hairpin City all appeared dim to varying degrees on the map. The White Flower City was almost reduced to darkness, and the Fairy Hairpin City was divided into 2. The friend of the Taoist named Slim May is now traveling through the fairy hairpin city, not knowing if there will be an accident. In Biwas Mountain Shrine, nearly 20 natal lamps are secretly enshrined. This is a deadly friendship on the mountain. It can be seen that Shanjun Biwu has a good reputation in this wild world. Many monks of the demon race can't trust their own Zongmen Zushatang, but they can trust the Green Mountains and Green Wives. This is why Biwu was so nervous when he faced Ning Yao, who was climbing before. He was really afraid that Ning Yao would not agree with him, so he cut off the ban on the landscape of the temple, and then chopped the temple and the natal lamps together. Once the ancestral temple is broken by Ning Yao, those natal lamps that are closely linked to the luck of the Dayue mountain will definitely be revealed together. Such a series of military exploits, 1 immortal, 9 jade pure realm, and the rest are at least earth immortals. Once all the natal lamps are destroyed, they will at least fall by 1 level. Together, they are almost comparable to killing an ascended monk. Credit for it. It stands to reason that the summer palace of the Great Wall of Jianqi should have heard of this matter, and it has already been recorded. Ning Jianxian may not know this, but Chen Pingan, who has served as a hermit for many years, absolutely knows the inside story. So Biwu couldn't understand why this young hidden official who knows the most careful calculations would pass by here, but was willing to let Qing Shan go. Biwu thought for a while, walked out of the house, went elsewhere, and stood under an old plum tree. Fortunately, the natal lamp in the temple was intact, and the tree in front of him had never withered. This means that the old Thin May not only survived, but he didn't seem to be damaged. Without a breeze, the old tree swayed, and then the figure of a monk emerged. Biwu clasped his fists and smiled, skinny Taoist friend. It was on the side of the Dragon Gate of Xianzhan City. The old monk with the name of Thin May gasped for breath and made no secret of his panic, and said with lingering fear, standing on the top of the long men archway, the young hermit extended his finger. It was just a pointer. The second seat of Immortal Hairpin City next to me was exploded on the spot, and there was nothing left of Jin Dan and Yuaning. That was a Jade Pu realm monk, and there was no way to fight back. Too late to show. Biwu had some doubts. The old monk waved his hand, "Don't ask anything." Shanju nodded with a smile. Then the old monk solemnly said, "Mr. Biwu Mountain, I have to take a long trip immediately. Things are rushed, I'm afraid I need to borrow that train with you temporarily." Biwu didn't ask why, he lent his car to a friend without hesitation. With a wave of his hand, that celestial vehicle immediately swept from the backyard of the temple, the size of a palm, the flames rising, the electric light intertwined. Biwu with a light push. At the same time, he taught a friend how to drive a train with his heart. The old monk smiled bitterly and said, "Mr. Biwu Mountain, if there is an accident, even if I take my life, I can't afford it." Biwu smiled and said, "This trip to Tuoyue Mountain is really going to be an accident." Taoist Shomei only cares about the property and life, and there is no need to talk about compensation. Just be Qing Shan and this treasure, the fate is exhausted. The old monk stomped his foot and didn't say any polite words. He drove the train and hurried to Tuoyue Mountain. According to the agreement with the young hermit, he wanted to give a message to Fei Ran. Shanjun Biwu twisted the rosary all the way, walked to the Wenshu monastery, and respected the 3 sticks of incense sincerely. The capital of the Moor dynasty. Yi Bao, the great cultivator of the Ascension realm, returned to Jade City with the sword of a woman Wu Fu. A palace treasure house, terrible sea. There is also a large pool of money treasury of the princes of the capital of the Moor dynasty, with a high position in the temple, and the treasures accumulated by the family for generations of monks have been looted. Some old money that has never been moved from the bottom of the box is probably almost like Moor. The dynasties are of the same age, and I never thought that the 2 sword immortals who hadn't been ignored by the emperors of the past dynasties, even gave the Great Wall of Jinchi so immortal and did not change their lives with the old and new thrones, they were hollowed out. It really doesn't work if you don't give it, and a little hesitation is just a sword of light. At this time, in the capital court hall, many old monks who had no time to put on official robes beat their chests and feet, and some female monks with prominent official positions were crying. Both sides hoped that the emperor would help to ask for justice. Yi Waterfall, who had lost a sword formation, became more and more upset. In this jade version of the city, he was the emperor who was most injured. Bai Ren's face was pale, her lips trembling, her hands clenched fists. Before in the corridor of the high-rise building where the sword formation was, Chen Pingan, who was dressed up by the man, stuck her finger on her forehead and threw directly out of the capital. From the end, Wufu fell into the mountain territory. She glanced at a girl who had hooked up with Yi Pu privately, and one step was a blow to the head, and then several punches to kill the golden core fox charm. White Blade waved her sleeves to disperse the scent of foxes, turned her head and looked at the unprepared guys coldly. She gave a casual excuse, dared to collude with foreign sword repairers, try to plot to usurp the throne, something that does not know whether it is life or death. Sitting on the dragon chair, Yi Waterfall nodded, then all family properties will be confiscated. It's a point to be able to make up for it. Zhuquanzong. The sovereign Dao Hao Linglais is an old veteran fairyland monk. The old sovereign and Mi Ji, the master of Yupu, left the mountain together and Yufeng came to the wine shop. The shopkeeper handed over the little summer money left by Lu Ji, and the old sword fairy Qi Tingji's Guyu money. The old fairy stroked his beard and smiled. Now it seems that our Jiuquan sect still has a lot of face. Liang, Qi Tingji, Lu Ji. If we can add another last hermit, Qin Pingan. Mi Ji drank the wine, turned her head and glanced at the extremely deserted street outside. I don't know if I can see Mi Yu again. Mi Ji has heard of this Jian Xiu with the same surname for a long time and has never seen him. Linglais glanced at the beautiful palm rhythm monk, and said jokingly, seeing what Na Mi is doing, your slender waist can't stand his sword. Mi Ji took a sip of wine and laughed. I only heard that there are tired cows, but there are no bad fields. The old fairy suddenly realized that he touched his Li's nose, and sighed for no reason. Suddenly I miss Alien's words on the wine table. Fairy Hairpin City. The deputy city lord Inlu didn't know why he could avoid one death, but his soul was detained by that person with a secret technique, causing the fairy Inlu to fall into Yupu. The two sections of Gaoqing, originally known as the highest city in the world, are now blocked by two landscape charms, separated by hundreds of miles from each other, and cannot be joined together again. What's more, even if Inlu had the ability, he definitely did not dare to restore Xianyan City to its original appearance. The new city lord, who was about to be frightened, felt that even though he was in the same 14th realm, he was just as silly as he was facing that one. Luluo Waters. Concubine Fei couldn't care about the avenue's damage. With that breath, she immediately shrank the mountains and rivers and came to a tree. She endured the discomfort in her heart. She was a little bit twisted. After learning from the mountain girl, she gave a blessing and said respectfully, Fei the concubine has met Mr. Bai. Even if she had been discussing matters in the Hall of Valor before, facing the high thrones of Tuo Yukshan Dazu and Wenhai Zhoumi, she had never been so pretentious. Bai Zhe stepped forward, landed on the ground, stood beside Fei Fei, shook his head, just call her by name. Bai Zhe turned his head and looked at Fei Fei, a pair of scarlet eyes that seemed to be filled with hope. Bai Zhe asked, don't you guys hold hate? Fei Fei can be described as bleak at the moment. She grinned, lifted the back of her hand to wipe the blood on her face, shook her head and said, I dare not have it, and there will be no. Bai Zhe moved slowly, Fei Fei immediately followed, and did not dare to walk side by side with the biggest traitor, in the wild world, she was half a figure behind. The opportunity that originally belonged to Yangji will be given to you together. Bai Zhe said in his heart, but you have to promise something. If you and Yang Ji will reunite in the future, don't think about killing Yang Ji, let her make a living, let her walk a road. How can it be done? Fei Fei thought for a while and nodded, since Mr. Bai has said, Fei Fei can certainly do it. In fact, there are two great disputes between Fei Fei and Yang Ji. One is competing for wild water transportation, and the other is more concealed, because Fei Fei's avenue is rooted in a dispute between water and fire. Therefore, in Bai Zhe's view, Fei Fei's avenue is much higher than Yang Ji. Bai Zhe said, then remember it, I will just say the Tao Ju again. It is a little practice trick that I have worked out without having to do anything in the early years. It is about 4,000 words. The Great Avenue, the sun and the moon, the yin and yang, the 6 lines of gossip, 1,000 words, the body of the soul, only in Canli. After replenishing Xiantian, the mud-water golden pill, regulating the heat, the world is endless. Yang, fire and yin talisman are 2 secret agreements, capturing the sun and moon in a year, the star Doluo sets out the road and the outline, and the heart is the same as the horse. Water nourishes spirit smoke, fire nourishes spirit spring, Liju first emerges water, volcano burns out by itself. Zuan's his lightning bolt thunder Guangfei, rewinding the yellow river around Xuanji. White snow and yellow buds match Canli, refine the universe in the sun and moon pot. Bai Zhe only said the Tao Ju once. As an old throne demon, it is of course not difficult to remember the words. What is commendable is that the Fei concubine had a clear understanding during the recitation, so that she ushered in Fuyuo. The resonating vision of the world of broken water transport. Dao Xianwei, the art of longevity, it is difficult to know without the teacher's guidance. At the height of Fei Fei, the great monk on the top of the mountain, in fact, it is difficult for anyone to give advice on his own practice. Bai Zhe is an exception. Fei Fei once again sincerely gave a blessing and thanked Bai Zhe, who has the grace of preaching. Bai Zhe just remained silent. Concubine Fei was anxious. Mr. Bai, is it possible that our barren world has fallen into such a field, and can only be run around by a few sword celestials? Bai Zhe shook his head and said, Tuoyue mountain needs to be besieged and killed Liang and the left and right, and Chen Pingan is not a concern for the time being. With the help of the 3 mountain talisman, they have appeared in the wild hinterland, which is probably a big accident. The 2 top combat powers in the world, Tuoyue Mountain and Zhongta Confucian Temple, have their own arrangements, and both sides perform their duties. During the period, except for the real fire dragon, they went out to the remote gate alone to perform the 2 methods of water and fire, and the rest of the world's mountain monks, they didn't make any moves based on their preferences alone. Just like Tingji, there are Beta Shengjing Juzhong, the big end woman Valkyrie Pei Cup, and Huayin, one of the 10 people in Middle-earth, and the Ascension realm from the demon race, Taishishin Guouding. In addition there are also Lu Xia from Tianyao Township in Fuyao and Songqian from Lixiazu, the female fairy Songqian, who did not do anything extra, but followed the established agenda of the Confucian Temple, and followed the rules and regulations. The cultivators of the fairyland outside the world no longer dared to advocate without permission, because there is a lesson from the past, and the fairy is so cautious, let alone the cultivator of the jade. Fei Fei asked cautiously, can Mr. Bai go further? Is it possible to join the Dao Wilderness, one of the 15th realms in the legend? It's a pity that Bai Zhe turned a deaf ear and didn't give the answer that Fei Fei wanted. Fei Fei did not ask much. Bai Zhe was silent for a moment, and laughed at himself. Don't think that there is one more me, what the wild world can really do. Fei Fei said, Mr. Bai only needs to be in his hometown. In her opinion, there are only 3 monks in the world who have the most hope to become a brand new 15th realm. The Saints of Rituals for the Howren World. The head teacher Bai Yujing, who was missing. Then there is this Bai Zhe, who has returned to the wild world next to him. A smile suddenly appeared in Bai Zhe. Back then, he took the maid Qingying to travel to Aquarius Island. Someone once teased him, of course it was a harmless joke. The fox swims with me, and I must be evil. At that time, Bai Zhe replied, the snow is vast, and the caged bird is flying high. Concubine Fei was shocked. She immediately turned her head to look in the direction of Tuiyue Mountain. She could not see the outline of the mountain with exhaustive eyesight. It was just that the atmosphere that affected the whole world made Fei feel a sense of suffocation of being affected by the pond fish. Mr. Bai, this is. Bai Zhe's footsteps were a little heavier, and his expression was indifferent, and he said to Fei to break the secret, someone is opening the mountain with the sword. After a while, only Chen Pingon had already handed out 3,000 swords, which meant that the culprit had died 3,000 times. Bai Zhe didn't seem to care about Tuiyue Mountain's safety, suddenly raised his head and looked at the bright moon that had been centered in the air. The 5 sword repairmen, plus 1 Lu Shen, had to drag the moon beyond moving the mountain. This is not surprising. In the previous criminal officer house's ascension to the bright moon, Bai Zhe had already felt in it. The bright moon seemed to be the place for the little girl to cultivate. But what surprised Bai Zhe was that Chen Pingon seemed determined to be alone. He could move the mountain with his sword, and cut the culprit of the great demon at the peak of the ascent. Sword of Coming Chapter 862. On Tuiyue Mountain, except for the monks and all kinds of mountain guardians, all the dead have been refined by the great demon culprit, so every time the mountain guard formation is destroyed and reopened, it is an invisible the time flowed back for a year, which made all the concealment techniques and escape methods of the monster monks in the mountain seem meaningless. After each round of questioning the sword by the 5 swordsmen of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the culprit of the big demon was all the monks of the monster race will show up in place, but the acupoint aura and body magic weapons will not follow their footsteps to restore to their original state. It's like a group of poor passers-by walking on the banks of the long river of time. They must go through storms, bury their heads, and constantly change the time ferry, hurting their feet little by little, and then retreat to the place inexplicably, and have to face it. Greater despair is to face the sword light that obscures the sky. The previous 5 sword repairmen, each time they asked the sword to support Wuxian together, most of the hidden officials were responsible for opening the mountain with their swords, and took the lead in cutting through the mountain protection formation of the long river of time. The remaining 4 sword repairers were responsible for killing the monsters, and at the same time. However, the sword aura and the vast sword intent consumed the aura and the luck of the mountains and waters that a mountain of Tuiyue had accumulated for thousands of years, finally changing the time and place. Chen Ping alone handed out a full 3,000 swords. The pioneer disciple of the great ancestor of the wild, the culprit of the great demon was drawn from the center of the forehead and the eyebrow, and was slashed in half by the sword light. Because Chen Pingon handed his sword too fast, he cut to the culprit in yellow clothes standing on the top of the mountain again and again, but this big demon was so arrogant that he remained motionless all the time, letting the sword light cut his head. Is like being chopped in half, and a golden light in the center is not scattered, like a long golden river that separates and confronts the 2 peaks. The current situation of this ascendant peak great demon is so similar to those 2 sword Qi great walls. Probably this is an alternative gift deliberately made by the last hermit. The monks of the Jade Innocent Realm in the mountains are already dead, let alone those who follow them to climb the mountain to visit Tuiyue Mountain. At the moment, there are only 3 great monsters in the fairyland, either relying on a time-consuming natal spell, or struggling to kill the natal magic weapon and thousand-year Taoism again and again, still struggling to support. 6 of the Yupu realm monster monks who participated in the discussion here were molded for 8 lifetimes. How could they not believe that they would be made dumplings in Toyua Mountain? Escape. Where can I escape? Going outside of Toyua Mountain, losing the protection of the formation of the long river of time, facing the sword light of those ascending sword repairs. What's more, Tuashin's formation can not only isolate the sword light, but also be a natural prison for besieging the monks of the monster race, making the monks of the monster race succumbing to the ground every day. After all, who can imagine that it will be the most stable in the wild world? In the place, Chiyu was hit by a questioning sword. The old sword fairy Chi Tingji with lettering on the head of the city is best at helping people and soldiers get on the road. In the past, Lu Ji, who together with Xiao Xing called the Great Wall of Sword Chi fierce, seemed to have advanced swordsmanship. Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world, she has entered the Ascendant realm earlier than the barren world co-lord, whose status is roughly equal today. There is also a man who jumped out from nowhere. He called himself a criminal officer and was an undoubtedly ascended sword repairman. Therefore, in the wild places, or in their own patriarch hall, or similar to the Qingshan Temple of Dayue, or in some hidden forbidden landscapes and secrets, a series of natal lamps have been lit to help the monks reborn and escape death. Jia, just practice can start again, but the previous realm has disappeared, and the natal lamp can indeed extend life, but the road to climb in the future will be disgusted by the road in the future. According to legend, the monk who lit the natal lamp, before entering the 5 realms, the demons encountered were beyond imagination. Just like the concealed potential of Zhongtu Shenzhou, such a promising young man of heaven, if he hadn't capsized in the gutter of Luzhou in Beiju, he would have great hope of becoming a young man with his potential as a monkhood. One of 10 alternates. The culprit in the yellow clothes doesn't care about the life or death of those monster monks, and they don't have any pity for them as if they were dying under their noses. Life is like an ant, like drowning in a heavy rain of sword energy. The culprit glanced at the sword held by Chen Pingan. The sword slashed at Yuishan so many times that the sword's edge did not show any signs of damage, on the contrary, it became more and more unmatched. The culprit remembered the vision of heaven and earth brought by this long sword, and thought of those pages of the old almanac that were only passed on by word of mouth, and roughly guessed the roots and feet of the sword, smiled and said, "It's a good fate, I can get lucky." The sword recognizes the master, and of course his life is hard enough to catch the sword and never degenerate into a puppet. Since ancient times, immortal soldiers have their own spiritual heritage, just like a rebellious existence. The monks' dispositions are often in line with them, and they are often affected by their own refinement of the immortal soldiers. More and more indifferent, and if there is a slight deviation on the road, it will quietly lead the master to a fork in the road. In the end, the monk can't bear it, and the fairy will be able to escape from the cage and regain freedom, regardless of those years old. The innate treasure is the acquired refining of the treasures of heaven, material and earth, and step by step to the rank of immortal soldiers. This is where the common root of immortal soldiers in the world lies, no master. So every great monk who has reached the 14th realm has a very subtle attitude towards the fairy soldiers, and it is by no means as simple as the more, the better. Many monks in the upper 5 realms close their lives in deaths. Once the corpse is unfortunately dismantled, it is often a flash of light. Even the immortal soldiers of the great refinement will not follow the monks to disintegrate, but will still return to the world, and then hide in a certain place. Get up and wait for the fate of the next master. The more the top big sect, the less will it deliberately prevent those immortal soldiers from leaving, because even if they are forced to stay, they will only bring many inexplicable disasters to the mountain, and the gains outweigh the losses. Otherwise, due to the preciousness of the fairy soldiers, it has long been searched by several mountain monks in the world, and all attribution has been established as a rule. There are more than 300 orifice acupoints in the world of humans. What is the difficulty of the Qi Palace? Why is there no great monk who is full of great immortal soldiers in the Qi Palace? Like the precious wooden box containing 8 long swords, Lu Chen said to lend it to Lu Ji. Besides the poem in his heart, only has a fairy sword Tai Bai as the object of attack. In addition to his own Dao Fa, Yudo also only had the fairy sword named Dao Zhang. And the old throne in the wild world, once every one of them was aspiring to reach the top, and the 14 realms of the Dao, before attacking the vast world, they will never stare at the so-called mountain treasures, but the landscape and dynasty luck. Invisible virtual things. The culprit smiled and asked. The hidden officer handed out 3,000 swords one after another. Are you tired? Should I pay the courtesy? Chen Pingan, wearing a lotus crown, barefoot in a blue shirt, and a sword in one hand, stands in the heaven and earth. Every time he breathed out, there were purple and golden air lingering around his face. For the 3-headed lingering fairy cultivator of the fairyland monster, the luck of misfortune is that the 4 sword repairmen outside the hermit have swam far away with their swords. It seems that they are going to soar to a bright moon. Plus the culprit said to pay the courtesy. Does it mean that from this moment, the situation on both sides will start to reverse? Chen Pingan ignored the culprit's inquiry and just looked around. Aside from thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, there are many demonic monks hiding everywhere, mostly from the vassal sect of Tuyua Mountain. Do you think you get the moon first when you get close to the water tower? Still like watching theaters? Mind movement is a vision of heaven and earth that arises at will. I saw a sea of clouds surging in the sky, and just below the sea of clouds is a monster mountain. The white clouds finally manifested a huge white palm like jade from the sea of clouds. Protruding down from the middle, the palm lines as large as mountains are like rivers and streams, full of green and faint lotus, budding, swaying, and there is bright moonlight, scattered among the lotus ponds. Suddenly, numerous crystal-clear snow-white lotuses bloomed. Chen Pingan's surgical method was clearly stealing the teacher from the credit month, and the credit month was imitating the master of the Lotus Temple at the time. It was carried out by Chen Pingan. It looks like 7 or 8 points, and the gods still have 4 or 5 points. The main culprit of the big demon doesn't care about the survival of that mountain. He stretched out his hand, thunder and lightning were pure, condensing a line, and finally manifested a gilded spear, refined from the corpse of an ancient god, belonging to the culprit. One of a handful of key zombies. From the top of Tuyua Mountain, it breaks through the air and draws a straight long line, like a long rainbow shining through the sun, dazzling. Chen Pingan frowned slightly, raising his foot and moving one step across. On the side of Xianyan City, Chen Pingan's Taoist style completely ignored those attacking techniques from beginning to end. The light brought by the golden spear was nailed from the shoulder of Tsingyi Faxiang. Compared with Chen Pingan's 10,000-foot portrait, this golden light drawn by the long spear is as thin as a sewing cord, straight and sword-like. One end is in Tuyua Mountain, and the other end is more than 100 miles deep into the earth. It is enshrined by a sneaky head of Tuyua Mountain, which is hidden in the underground. It is holding a white jade bowl-shaped treasure, and suddenly appears a real body, half a dragon and half dragon. In his posture, he swallowed the white bowl that received the golden thread into his abdomen in one bite, and then began to swiftly move horizontally with his own life escape method. The ground vibrated endlessly and thunder bursts. The golden thread resembled a blade, and began to incline the shoulders of Chen Pingan's Faxiang, arousing a rough sound like a knife-carved gold stone, sputtering countless sparks. Chen Pingan stretched out and grabbed the long golden thread that pierced his shoulders, but he could not cut it off. Lu Chen's previous questioning was fruitless, and he has been a little absent-minded. Spirit, explained to Chen Pingan with the voice of his heart, because you carry the real name of the great demon on your body, you have become a cumbersome, and you have never really fallen into the poor state of the empty boat. Let's talk about the way to crack. I never thought that without waiting for Lu Chen's guidance, Chen Pingan had already strode horizontally and deliberately did not continue to use his sword to open the mountain, leaving the great demon culprit idle first. Wanzhong Faxiang then moved in the opposite direction to the Tuashan Mountain Protector enshrinement, as if to dislike it too much, so he simply helped it to cut open the shoulders of its own Faxiang. Lu Chen, an outsider lying in the Lotus Dojo, felt a pain for Chen Pingan. At the same time, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the sword, and then he took the long sword Yeo out of its sheath. After holding it in his right hand, Yeo suddenly became in line with the height of the law. He turned around and nailed a long sword straight into the ground, twisting his wrist, wrapped the long golden thread around his arm, and began to drag the really big underground monster, and kept moving closer to him. The earth, mountains, and rivers, which were originally immersed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the luck of mountains and waters for thousands of years, became extremely solid, suddenly soft and muddy. The real body of the monster race under the ground seemed to be aware of the line of life and death, and displayed the magical powers of his life, and continuously connected with Tuoyue Mountain. Shanzhen then crazily twisted his body and tried to run backwards. On the ground, a ravine that stretched for dozens of miles and more than 100 miles continued to spread. In the end, the behemoth, half dragon and half dragon, was severely dragged out from under the ground by Chen Pingan, and then dragged little by little towards the night ward tour of the sharp-edged sword. During the period, this monster clan's true body kept jumping and arching its back vigorously. Many mountains were flattened by the huge body, or smashed into huge valleys. Lu Chen sat up and looked down at the picture scroll. This is not fishing anymore. If a person drags a big fish on the shore, he has no magic skills, just competing with brute force. As a result, the genus of the dragon, which was thousands of feet long, was cut away from the head by a long sword that was nailed to the spot and split into two on the spot. Tit for tit. As for why this Tuoyue Mountain enshrinement does not take away its true body, part of the reason is that it swallows the gold thread. The culprit of the big demon seems to have intentionally kept it in its true body posture. Moreover, Chen Pingan sacrificed the caged bird and Jing Zhongyue at the same time. No more, no less, a small world was born, and it happened to cover the opponent's body with hundreds of thousands of flying swords densely clustered together. Lu Xun was amazed, and the hidden official and the people were fighting, and it was indeed straightforward. No wonder they can take advantage of Chao Si's side. When the Tuoyue Mountain was enshrined and divided, Chen Pingan held a sword in his left hand and continued to hand out a sword toward Tuoyue Mountain. After the sword opened the mountain, the gold thread wrapped around Chen Pingan's arm disappeared, and another golden spear appeared in the hands of the culprit. Lu Xun reminded, the culprit is trying to determine the distribution of the real names of the big monsters on your body. Be careful. Chen Ping An's Faxiang dissipated from the place and appeared thousands of miles away. He never thought that the long golden line would follow him like a shadow. This time it was directly nailed to Faxiang's heart. Chen Pingan reached out and grabbed the long line and just tore it to pieces, losing his tenacity. The first time he threw it out, Chen Pingan knew something was wrong, but from the top of Tuoyue Mountain, like a golden flower blooming, a spear in the hands of the great demon culprit unexpectedly threw out thousands of rays at the same time. So fast, even Chen Pingan couldn't avoid it. Those golden long lines carried the real name of the great demon within the form, stirring circles of golden ripples. To be the first disciple of the great savage ancestor, the culprit's cultivation qualifications will certainly not be bad. After joining the Dao Tuoyue Mountain, although it can only increase the path of the Ascension realm year after year, it is equivalent to completely losing the possibility of the 14 realms, but after cultivating the Tao for thousands of years, the so-called peak that was stagnating in the Ascendant realm is indeed the peak worthy of the name. Chen Pingan slashed towards Tuyuashin with a sword, causing the culprit to die again, and the long golden thread entwining the image disappeared. Day and night are reversed, and the darkness is heavy. The culprit looked up and saw a complicated sword formation with hundreds of thousands of flying swords. The floating sword array slowly pressed down towards the world. This scene is like falling from the sky. The culprit put together, chanting Tao Ju silently, and the other hand was lifted up, the lines on the palm of the palm were flowing, and a colorful mirror appeared. Raising the hand gently, the mirror rose, facing the sword formation that fell from the sky. Lu Shen was full of emotion, good, and the weather is really good. The culprit is tantamount to being in a one-corner place, unleashing the power of heaven and earth. Of course, Chen Pingan has the same profound intentions. In fact, in Lu Chen's view, I am afraid that this is an incomparable move in the world, and it is a good thing to use other mountains to attack Jade. The flying sword of Jing Zhongyue, the sword seems to be thrown out of thin air from the emptiness, like a sound of autumn, containing a powerful atmosphere. Chen Pingan is practicing both sword and sword. A swordsmanship that has long been familiar to Chen Pingan. While traveling all the way, I separated my mind and looked at the Guanqianjianzhai built by Lu Xin in Yushu City, then searched for memory in his mind, and visualized the sword from a distance. Chen Pingan used all the swordsmanship, sword intent, and kendo seen in the Great Wall of Qi to be used for his own use. In the previous 3,000 swords, he practiced swords one by one. Different swordsmanship, different sword intent, but Chen Pingan handed out the same trail of opening a mountain. As for now, 2 natal flying swords have been sacrificed, and Tuyua Mountain is regarded as the largest dragon-cutting stone in the world, used to sharpen the avenue and edge of the 2 natal flying swords. The fate of the bird in the flying sword cage is an extremely rare self-contained small world, and the size of the world is not only linked to the level of the sword repair realm, but actually also related to the size of Chen Ping's heart. What you see, what you think in your heart, is an unknowable expansion of the outside world. Among them, Chen Pingan was actually looking for a second kind of natal supernatural power, just like the Mountain of Princes can exist in the 5 sacred mountains. As for the second natal flying sword, the number of flying swords depends on the rising of the bright moon, at the bottom of the well, into the well, and finally from the head to the outside of the well. The culprit stepped on a Tuyua mountain, and there was another golden spear in his hand. In addition, the culprit Yin Shin came out of his body, reappearing the outer body of the young god, plus a Dharma image standing behind the true body. Beside the Yin god who was the culprit of the big demon, a woman appeared out of thin air. Her face was vague, her figure was graceful, and her sleeves were erratic. She seemed to be the legendary maid on the river, spiritual and most divine. Yang Shen is outside, holding a flame sledgehammer, reflecting the face of the great demon like an ancient fire deity. It seems that the spiritual path of the culprit is also the destiny that refining the 5 elements. The 5 elements belong to the mountain of Tuyue, the golden spear in the hands of the real body, the maiden of the spirit next to the Yin god, and the fire sledgehammer in the hands of the body outside. As for the wood objects, they are still invisible. Most of them use their sources to continuously generate spiritual energy to help the culprit support the use of magical powers. One of the several masters of Fuluo, who was as famous as the Fuluo Yuxian of the Haoran world in his early years, secretly refined this pagoda. In order to conceal people, he deliberately built the bronze pagoda as a blind method. Unexpectedly, a young Taoist boy rode a bull to pass the pass and travel. In the wild world, except for a finger at the Hall of Valor, knocked an old thrown big monster to the bottom, actually still in place, raising his sleeves, as if to slap gently. As a result, the Jade Talisman Palace that was a few million miles away, the old palace lord in retreat, together with a small cave sky, was shot to pieces on the spot, almost completely dead, and lost his real skin. The old monk in the Ascension realm became a ghost in the fairy realm, but it was the bronze pagoda. Daozu seemed to be merciful. He never destroyed this thing, and was finally succeeded by the master of the Lotus Nunnery. He only dared to study the Taoist meaning of the Jade Talisman Palace. I still dare not refining it casually into a destiny. I guess it feels hot, worrying that one day the Taoist ancestor will miss it, and another slap will fall away. When the time comes, the same round of bright moon will be smashed together. A fairy soldier lost a place of cultivation. In the end, the Lord of the Lotus Nunnery had no good intentions and cheated Li Zhen. Sure enough, Li Zhen was on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and he was killed by Chen Pingan, who was not a hermit and Jian Xiu at the time. Lu Qin glanced at the Dharma seal, holding his forehead speechless. In the early years in jail, with the help of the sewing man twisting the core, the Lu Man seal on this mountain was transferred from the mountain temple to a mountain top on the palm of the hand. The base of the French seal was a 16-character insect bird seal, collect 5 thunders, total perseverance. Cut the 5 leeks, cardinal of heaven and earth. The other 4 sides have no characters in the drawing, depicting the 9, closed eyes, gods, Lei Jun Electric Mother, Rain Master Fengshen, Yinli Lingjiang, and Huobu Tianguan, all of which are the gods who are part of the heavenly movement in the ancient heaven. There are a total of 36 gods, but they have not yet opened the eyes of the sky, as if they were in a state of sleep with no clergy. Chen Pingan put his fingers together and began to finish the portraits of those ancient gods. The third head teacher of Baiyujing used the ancient people's cloud when drinking in the Jiuquan sex shop to express his feelings. The school book is like sweeping leaves. Lu Qin temporarily borrowed a 14-level Taoist method to Chen Pingan, and he was very sincere. It was not only a realm, but also a knowledge. Therefore, as long as Chen Ping was willing and with his heart and mind, he could freely search for Lu Chen's certain restrictions. All the mental expressions are like a boat that is not tied, a carefree and unobstructed escape, visiting a sea of study that is almost endless, but ultimately surrounded by heaven. Only this way, Chen Pingan was more restrained, and it was not until this moment that he sacrificed this seal, drawing amulets for those gods like an eye-opener. Lu Xun held back for a long time before he looked a little regretful, and said slowly, "If you engraved the 4 characters Sanchen Joho, it would be fine." Lu Xun quickly added a sentence, and said cheerfully, "Of course, the imprint of the current heavenly stamp has a better meaning." It turned out that when Chen Pingan got it, the seal was like being cut off by someone else. Later, Chen Pingan used a talisman to open the mountain in the original alchemy book, and Chen Pingan went the other way and painted the talisman. Can be described as retrograde and reverse application, not written in any kind of talisman seal script in the world, but the most familiar and expert handwriting, respectively engraved 4 characters. The order is nailing, evil, Shen, Lu. Therefore, the final completion of the Lu Man Yin seal in Tianzi section is Lu Qinjiling. The spiritual image of the fire-type golden body god, holding up the 5 thunder seals in one hand, hung high above the sky in an instant. The golden body then pierced the sword fairy flag into the imitated white jade capital, like a big stick. The sword fairy hidden by the 18 flags is as small as a dust. After walking out of the place of the host, they are suddenly as tall as ordinary people, like 18 comets blasting into the distance, flying out of the city, and swords in all directions. Traveling far, with 18 fireflies, within the jurisdiction of Zio-Oceandy with a radius of 6,000 miles of mountains and rivers, strangling with the sword the remaining monster monks who thought they were hiding, but actually had traces to follow. Wait until the 36 deities of the Dharma seal were all put on by Chen Pingan. They left the 5 thunder Dharma seal as if they were reborn. Like the heaven that has collapsed 10,000 years ago, at this moment, the backbone is complemented and order is restored, making the small world of caged birds more and more fit the avenue without any omissions. But Lu Chen didn't know why. The closer he was to the oneness, the more he felt that he was far away from the truth of the oneness. Ming Lu Chen saw in his eyes. It was like a prototype that more and more resembled the old heavenly court, but with a Taoist heart, Lu Chen became more and more regretful and lost. Because the master appeared in Bai Yujing for the last time, he had talked to Lu Chen, and everything he thought was out of the ordinary. The two 14th realm great monks let go of their hands and feet, and apart from the ascendant realm, they don't need to expect to help. It is difficult for anyone to intervene in it. A fairyland demon clan chi training man, and the yellow-clothed culprit pleaded bitterly, "Ancestor help. All life-saving spells and magic weapons have been exhausted." It had to show its true body. It was a crimson centipede that was as long as a rolling mountain range, around a section of Tuiyue Mountain, raised its huge head, and prayed for shelter from the culprit on the mountain. The other two big demon immortals, one shrunk like a mustard seed, and the other leaning on the natal robe that can travel time and water, also began to call for help with the culprit. In the Tuiyue Mountain, there are 3 big monsters in the fairyland, 6 Jade Pu realms, plus the immortal monk. The 5 sword repairmen of the Great Wall of Sword Chi traveled here together, outside of the ascendant realm of Xiandan City, Wuzi. This time the slashing of the Suoyu Mountain together seemed to be regarded as the ascendant realm of sword cutting. Chen Pingan glanced at Tuiyue Mountain, which now looks like an empty shell. Is like that brilliant, or perhaps even earlier carefulness, deliberately leaving only the culprit here, waiting for the sword. As for who is here to ask the sword, it doesn't matter. The culprit seemed to be stunned. It was only at this moment that he could vomit quickly. He squinted and said with a smile, "Chen Pingan, have you forgotten one thing? You seem to be in harmony with you now. Are you really a sage to accompany a Confucian temple? If you fight for your life, can you protect the half of the city? If I remember correctly, the one that caused you to be scolded the most was when the Summer Palace ordered to block Qingtu Jiangxia's self-sacrifice and save others. Why, it's your turn, you can't stand it. Officer, just want to engrave in the city to prove his worthy sword repair status." Lu Chen became serious. This guy is not a bluff. Chen Pingan handed out a sword, and said to Lu Chen in his heart, "It doesn't matter. Cut to death the peak of the Ascension realm." The biggest depressed culprit was actually a trivial matter. It was the young hidden official of this dog day. This time he asked Jian Tuoyuashan, from beginning to end. He didn't say a word to himself. Any ship in the world will have ballast stones. Chen Pingan joined the half of the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Before he met his senior brother Cui Yang and returned to his hometown strangely, in fact, in order to survive more years, he first stripped out sadness, fatigue, hatred, anger. It was equivalent to stripping out almost everything. In the end, even more emotions were picked out one by one, just to be able to take care of half of the sword energy for longer, even if it was only 1 year, 1 month, or even 1 more day. This is why in Dali capital, Chen Pingan, who walked out of the mirror and appeared in a purely divine posture, is so powerful. Because of Chen Pingan's human nature at that time, he was incomplete. And Chen Pingan's price may only be known after the sacrament of tracing the origin through that long journey. Ning Yao doesn't know, husband doesn't know, students and disciples don't know. While Chen Pingan stayed in half of the Great Wall of Jinchi, the biggest ballast stone was a kind of character that Chen Pingan cherished the most in his life. Is called hope. In the northernmost boundary of the wild world, under the southern land of the 2 Sword Chi Great Walls, a breath of ancient times appeared in the extreme depths. The earth cracks. A high-ranking who slept soundly here for thousands of years began to wake up with his eyes open. First broke through the ground, the flying dust quickly dispersed, and an empty armored body appeared, with only a pair of golden eyes staring at the high city tens of thousands of miles away. Then there was a constant divinity, condensed from all over the wild world, snow-white armor, huge body, mottled monuments, and blazing flames. It reached out and held down the visor, leaving only its golden eyes, and slowly got up, holding a huge blade. In the words of the ancient gods, it slowly said, "The one who is fortunate enough to see the blade is unfortunate." On the other side of Tuiua Mountain, Chen Pingan just kept handing swords with Tuiua Mountain, and at the same time battling the culprit. Lu Xun was speechless, suddenly got up and then turned his head, jumping and looking towards the northernmost side, muttering, "This old sword fairy, why don't you speak credibility?" Chen Pingan smiled heartily, "It's not the first time anyway. In the half of the Great Wall of Sword Chi where no one should have appeared, an old man who was supposed to be the least supposed to show up appeared. After holding one hand and rubbing his chin with the other, he raised his head and looked at the who came to the Great Wall of Sword Chi after a step, and said, 'Everyone treats himself as invincible. Up.' The old man stretched out his hand casually, and all the sword intent remaining in the Great Wall of Sword Chi for thousands of years, if received an edict, even if some seemed to be not listening, and reluctantly, he had to come obediently, and finally in the hands of this old sword repairman. Condensed into a sword, the old man weighed it, the weight was acceptable, and it was just an understatement towards the ancient high-ranking god, sweeping a sword. After a sword, the world is quiet. The old man nodded to himself, as if he was in a relationship with all sword repairs within 10,000 years, and said the simplest truth, "See you, this is swordsmanship." You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.